And the time is 6:30. I'd like to call the District 204 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Marilyn, can you please call the roll?
Member Aubert? Here. Member Vita Daniels? Here. Member Dillon?
Here.
Member Grotch? Here. Member Kelly?
Here.
Member Swinehart?
Here.
Member Thomas?
Here.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
We'll begin tonight's meeting with agenda-related public participation. Do we have any agenda-related comments, Marilyn?
No.
Great, thank you. That concludes our agenda-related public comments section. Before we begin our working session this evening, I wanted to take some time to address two significant issues impacting our district. The first relates to recent student conduct involving hurtful and racist comments on social media. These actions do not align with LT's values. There are no words that will take away or undo the harm that is caused when we treat each other with anything less than the respect that each person deserves. And yet here we are again. We are deeply saddened by the damage this does to our community, especially to our non-white students and families. We need to be reminded that the feelings and actions of some people do not represent the feelings and actions of others. This is a pursuit in social justice and in an equitable, inclusive environment that enriches students' lives and provides the space to celebrate and embrace our differences. A place where each student feels welcome and comfortable to grow and learn. The board is committed to measures and tangible actions that further our equity and belonging initiatives. To that end, we have begun a review of all policies related to student conduct and behavior. We will examine the expectations we have of our student community and remain steadfast in improving policies as they relate to equity and an inclusive school culture for each and every student. This is not comprehensive of what it will take for our community to get it right, but it is important and urgent work that our board is committed to. Ultimately, we must all work together to remove barriers and cultivate the inclusive and welcoming environment each and every student deserves. We need parents, community members, coaches, teachers, faith leaders, and everyone who interacts with our youth to play a part in this journey. We implore you to have hard conversations with your children and with each other, to challenge hate and to champion love. The second issue facing our district right now is regarding COVID-19 mitigation measures. The last 10 days have been challenging due to the uncertainty created by the February 4th ruling in Sangamon County. Since then, we have received a variety of opinions and input from the community. It is most important to emphasize that we are in full compliance with the law to follow the governor's executive order, as we were not named in the lawsuit. The circuit court ruling in Sangamon County has no jurisdiction over Illinois school districts, including LTHS. Moreover, we have been in constant contact with our legal counsel and are adhering to their legal advice and recommendations during this interim period. We anticipate an appellate court decision very soon, which will likely have further implications regarding the governor's executive order. The Board of Education remains committed in continuing to adhere to the executive order, which includes universal masking. We support the district administrative team in their efforts to implement all of our COVID-19 mitigation measures as outlined on the LTHS website. As we continue to monitor the situation, it's important to provide a few facts here as well. 93% of our staff and 63% of our students have submitted proof of COVID-19 vaccination. The positivity rate in our community continues to decline, and we know the next few days and weeks will be critical in determining our next steps. In the interim, we continue to ask our community for empathy, respect, and patience. The future of our mitigation efforts will impact everyone in the community, and for many, adjustments will be hard. It is the responsibility of each and every one of us to continue to treat one another with kindness and respect, and of course, we will continue to provide updates to our community as the information becomes available. Thank you for your patience on this brief but important update. We can now continue with our working session, and we'll begin with our first agenda item. First up tonight, we have under curriculum items, a grading practices update, and I will turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, President Dillon. We appreciate the opportunity to share an update on our grading practices evolution, which really stretches back 5 years, five to 7 years, really. And so we're all ready with the slideshow, right? Okay. So going back several years, this has been an important and much discussed topic, and one that we felt was very important to address going back several years. Throughout the years, we have presented on this to our Board of Education, but this is the first time that at least 4 of our board members have heard the story about where we've been, where we are, and probably most importantly, where we're going. So I'm going to spend just a short amount of time talking about the impetus for this work, which really covers that 2017 to 2020 timeframe. Once I do that, Scott Eggerding, Jen Tyrell, and Katie Smith are going to share what's happened since the beginning of the school year, and then also include some adjustments that were made in time for second semester, and then also some recent data that we've collected around the topic of grading. So this journey really begins prior to 2017, when surveys and feedback at that time indicated a sense of frustration on the part of students and staff about inconsistencies among teachers of the same course in the areas of grading scales, of retake policies, and different grading practices. I think what we found was as our classroom teachers participated in professional development and continued to improve their instructional practices, our district grading practices and procedures didn't keep up. So in 2018-2019, a grading task force was established. This group of professionals surveyed students, surveyed staff, reached out to our associate schools, reached out to universities, participated in some book studies, completed site visits to other schools, and ultimately developed a grading practices vision and mission for our school. Moving on to 2019-2020, our staff continued to further their professional development around grading by attending workshops and presentations facilitated by Dr. Thomas Gusky. And the grading task force established a purpose of grading and implementation guidelines that would allow our school to overall improve the way we grade and assess students. So all of this work led to our current vision for grading, which we know. We believe that the grading system at LT must be consistent throughout the school, equitable and fair to all students, and reflective of student performance. We also believe that consistent grading practices ensure that a grade communicates a student's level of achievement toward identified learning objectives at a point in time. The grading task force continued and really drilled down to refine and explain that we want a grade to reflect growth and learning. We want a grade to value knowledge and understanding, to provide a roadmap for success. We also don't want a grade to measure behavior or soft skills. We also don't want a grade to measure effort or punctuality or attendance. There's certainly other ways that we give feedback to students and assess that, but we don't want that to be part of the learning grade. A grade must also not measure personal organization or executive functioning or give points for extra credit or simple compliance. As we looked at our practices, as the grading task force applied those philosophies and theories to what actually happens in the classroom, the team really felt it was important to have a common syllabus used by all teachers who teach the same course. We also want to get to a place where a common grade book is used by all teachers of the same course. Felt it was important to not include practice. We want to give students the chance to practice without including that in the semester grade. Excluding attendance from the semester grade was also very important. Not giving extra credit, and then students receiving individual grades for work completed in groups. We don't want to apply group grades, so to speak. So that was all the work that really happened during that 2019-2020 school year. As we prepared for 2020-2021, we of course encountered the global COVID-19 pandemic, which really forced us to take a look at where we were and make some pretty significant adjustments for what now is last school year. We also, though, wanted to continue to provide a significant amount of professional development as our teachers continued to work through this. So that takes us to the end of last year, and is simply just a very short description of kind of what happened over a 4-year period and how we've gotten to the place we're at now. So our primary purpose tonight is to really discuss, since the beginning of the school year, where we've been and where we're going. So I'm going to turn this over to Scott Eggerding, who's going to take the next part.
Thank you very much. So as we started the school year, we really wanted to make sure we got off to a solid start. We had come through a summer with quite a few summer workshops. As you recall, when we shared about those in October and November, our teachers had the opportunity to get together to clarify those syllabi, to set up their grade books, and in particular for 17 teams to continue their A to F pilot. Some were new to the pilot, some were experienced in that. We did change some of the guidelines to implement, but really the focus was on grading summatives, not formatives, and the focus was particularly on being consistent across teams and providing as much feedback as possible on those formative assessments. We had ongoing discussions throughout the throughout the fall, and we started to get a lot of feedback. You're going to hear about some of that in a minute. But what we saw in particular had to do with revision. We saw many students using revision, and we had many theories about why revision was happening. And again, you'll see some more information later as we did some surveying about those revision. But what we found was that students were using the retake opportunities. If you recall, prior to this year, retakes were not consistent across the school, weren't even allowed necessarily in some courses. So again, there's a theme here, and that's trying to be consistent in what we are doing so that students have a consistent experience going forward. So once we got the school year started then, we started getting feedback, and we were starting to watch grades at both the quarter and as we were getting to the end of the semester, we began to collect feedback. But what we heard particularly was feedback. And if you look, though, at our vision, before we even get to that feedback, our vision for grading, again, is consistency. It's about that consistency. And when you look at the changes that we made prior to 2020, a lot of variance, even sometimes within the same course team. We were even finding up until 2 years ago a course team that had 3 separate grading scales within one team. So again, when kids were complaining and parents were complaining about grading prior to a lot of these changes, it's a total roll of the dice as to who your teacher is, what your grade's going to be. And we did not want that. We wanted that consistency. We also wanted to make sure our grading scales were consistent. And we are now at 3 scales. Our goal obviously is to be at 1 for the schools at some point, but we have either an A to F scale, which has no points, a 0 to 100 scale, and some teams have agreed on a 50 to 100 scale, with 50 being the lowest F. All that is clear in the syllabus, which is why we were very important to focus on the syllabus, but in no team is there a variance, so each team is consistent. And lastly, with the gradebook setup, we had given guidelines for gradebooks, such as there should be a section for formatives and a section for summatives. Some people had set up sections for formatives worth 10%, which again goes against the concept of the formative. So we set up for this year a very clear grading scale that everyone used in a grading system, which helped. So those were again, as you can see, we're working more and more toward that consistency, but we're not quite there yet, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But as I suggested a little bit earlier, as everything was sort of coming together, we were hearing a lot of concerns from students.
Good evening, everyone. Throughout the course of first semester, as Scott referenced, and prior to the issuance of first semester grades, concerns were raised through a variety of formats, through public comment emails, as well as through conversations with students, staff, and families. And this slide that you're looking at right now, slide 11, outlines many of the different concerns that were raised throughout the course of first semester. We heard that grades were lower and not representative of student learning, and Ms. Smith's going to address that in just a bit. We heard that students were not being held accountable for work and were unmotivated as a result of not being graded on formatives. We heard students were in a perpetual cycle of retakes because they weren't prepping for their initial summatives. There were concerns regarding both the number and types of assessments, summative assessments, that students were taking, and specifically we heard that there were not enough grades and students were only taking traditional tests. We heard that parents and students wanted an opportunity to give feedback concerning our grading practices. We also heard concerns regarding the elimination of the final exam schedule and the impact that it had on both retakes and grading. And I want to reiterate the fact that these concerns that were shared with our administrative team were prior to the end of the semester and prior to the issuance of grades for first semester. As we go on to the next slide, to respond to the concerns regarding lack of accountability and motivation, but to remain in line with the belief that students should not be graded on practice, an adjustment was made requiring students to complete the majority of formative assignments in order to be eligible for a retake. This would ensure students completed some practice prior to the summative. Without practice under their belt, the need for retakes would with practice under their belt, the need for retakes would hopefully decrease, and the concern about motivation and accountability was addressed. To respond to the concern regarding a lack of summative grades, as well as a lack of variety of summative assessments, assessment types that can be used as summative experiences were clearly articulated to parents and students. Presentations, quizzes, lab reports, performance assessments, essays, and traditional tests will be counted as summative assessments. And on January 5th, which was our Institute Day, all division chairs addressed their staff regarding the expectation of using multiple types of assessments, as well as the expectation of having a sufficient number of summative assessments as well. Course syllabi for second semester were also updated to reflect summative assessment types. In all communications, it was articulated that summative experiences such as projects and presentations do not mandate a retake opportunity as long as feedback was given throughout the process and before the summative grade is issued. To respond to the concern regarding the elimination of the final exam period, this has been reinstituted for second semester in an effort to provide teachers and students time to complete retakes and teachers time to assess student learning before submitting a course grade. It has also been clarified that students who are eligible will have an opportunity to retake all summative assessments that are subject to a retake, regardless of the time that the assessment was administered. Teachers will also have the option of administering no-harm finals that can only help a student's grade. As we move to the next slide, the graph that is included within this slide reflects the percentage of total grades issued for each letter grade for first semester. Since the 2017-2018 school year, the percentage of A grades has risen. This past semester, we reached a high of 52.8%. That means that of all grades issued, 52.8% were A's. Consequently, the percentage of B's and C's has decreased when compared to the 5-year average, and that excludes our hybrid learning year of 2020-2021. The percentage of D's and F's is almost the same as the 5-year average. What has increased is the percentage of incompletes, which will hopefully be remedied. This is not surprising considering student quarantining, student absences, as well as teachers responding to extenuating circumstances, and they've done a great job of clearing up a lot of the incompletes as the semester has started here, and we're still working on it. In summary, the grades did not go down first semester, and this chart reflects that. Since our goal is for students to master the learning and become proficient with the essential skills, regardless of the timeline, we are pleased to see the grades reflecting that this is occurring. Thank you, and now I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Smith, who will talk about the feedback that was received and some other data points.
Thank you. Good evening. In an effort to obtain feedback regarding grading changes, Grading questions were included in the environmental scan survey that was sent to parents, students, and staff in January after the first semester grades were posted. 1,574 parents, 1,403 students, which is 34% of the student body, and 308 staff members, 54% of all staff, participated in this survey. Of the 1,403 student respondents, at least 22% were from each grade level. Of the 1,403 student respondents, 0.6% reported being an English learner, 4% reported having an IEP, 10% reported having a 504 plan, and 5% reported receiving free lunch. We were slightly underrepresented in the area of free and reduced lunch, and underrepresented in the area of English learning and students with IEPs. If you disaggregated the survey responses by race and compared them to school demographics, we were underrepresented in Hispanic student responses by 3% and Black student respondents by 1%. In regard to our parent respondents, we were underrepresented by Hispanic respondents by approximately 10% and Black respondents by approximately 1%. The first statement in the chart There we go. The first statement in the chart captures the purpose of grading, which is intended to communicate learning, the acquisition of knowledge and skills. Of the survey respondents, 93% of professional educators, 88% of parents, and 65% of students agree or strongly agree that a grade is intended to communicate what a student has learned. Since 88% of parents indicated they agree that a grade is intended to communicate what a student has learned, it follows that the highest percentage of parent respondents, 49%, indicated that what matters most to them concerning grades is that grades are reflective of the content and skill their student has learned. The second statement in this chart confirms that over 96% of student respondents, parent respondents, and teacher respondents agree or strongly agree that students need practice and feedback before it is determined whether or not they have mastered a skill or concept. In order for grades to accurately reflect learning, the cognitive and non-cognitive factors must be separated, meaning achievement evidence must be separated from behavior and effort. However, it has been proven in many empirical studies written between 2000 and 2016 by over 20 educational researchers that most teachers have used a combination of cognitive and non-cognitive evidence, primarily perceptions of student effort and teachers' professional judgment of students' ability in determining grades. According to one of these researchers, Dr. Brookhart, one of the educational authors previously referenced, the result is a single amalgamated hodgepodge grade that mixes achievement and other factors related to effort, behavior, and attitudes. While this hodgepodge grade is what we are used to as educators, parents, and most high school graduates, depending on the school you attended, these type of hodgepodge grades do not accurately communicate learning. Considering that LT's new grading practices separate cognitive from non-cognitive factors, and this is new to many parents, guardians, and educators, it is not surprising that approximately 43% of parents express the most dislike for the exclusion of formative assessments, meaning homework and other types of practice, from the achievement grade, and approximately 51% of teachers agreed with this practice the least when compared to the other new grading practices. Despite the dislike or philosophical disagreement, approximately 74% of students, 70% of parents, and 71% of teachers felt that most or all of the grades earned first semester accurately represented what was learned. While LT has narrowed the components of a grade to accurately communicate what a student has learned, students did not fail at higher rates than in years past. As Dr. Tyrell previously mentioned, in 2021-2022, 4.4% of the grades earned first semester were Ds, which is similar to the 5-year average of 4.9%, and 1.3% of the grades were Fs, which is equivalent to the 5-year average of 1.3%. The largest difference in the grades earned this past semester when compared to previous years resides in the grade of A. 53% of the total grades earned were As, reflecting that the majority of students acquired skills and knowledge to a level of proficiency or mastery. This increased percentage of As is most likely due to the fact that students took additional opportunities, retakes, to demonstrate they have proficiently acquired the course knowledge and skills, which is the ultimate learning goal. The data demonstrated that approximately 78% of parents and 66% of staff agreed or strongly agreed that students who do not master the material by the time of the summative should have an opportunity to retake the assessment. 91% of students agreed or strongly agreed that students should have the opportunity to retake an assessment. Since the majority of students believe there should be a second opportunity to demonstrate learning, even if it was mastered after the duration of the unit of study, it is not surprising that the new grading practice liked by the most student respondents was retakes. 40% of our students ranked this as number one. While only 78% of the parents agreed that students should have an opportunity to retake an assessment to show mastery of the learning, the majority of parent respondents also indicated in regards to their number one that they liked this practice the most as compared to the others. Only 10% of the staff respondents indicated that they agreed with the retake practice the most by ranking it with a 1. When asked what their top concerns are with retakes, approximately 16% of the staff respondents indicated that they were the most concerned that students were getting stuck in a cycle of retakes. 14% indicated they were the most concerned that students weren't taking the initial summative seriously, and approximately 13% indicated they were most concerned that they didn't teach students accountability. When the students were asked why they were taking retakes, only 16% of the respondents indicated that they were unprepared for the initial summative. This response matched the parent assessment of their students' reasoning for retakes. Only 15% of parents indicated that their students pursued retakes because they were not prepared for the initial summative. Further evidence in support of the student perception of being prepared for the initial summatives is the percentage reporting that they did all or most of their formative work. Approximately 70% of students and a similar percentage of parent respondents, 74%, indicated all or most of their formative work was completed. This is starkly contrasted by the 29% of teachers who reported that their students did all or most of their formative work. If the teacher perception is reflective of the average percentage of completed formative work of all 120-ish of their students, then it follows that this would be their second largest concern about retakes. In an effort to alleviate staff concern and ensure students complete practice before the initial summative, the retake policy was adjusted for second semester to require students to complete more than half of their formative practice by the initial summative in order to even be eligible for a retake. The teacher's foremost concern about retakes was that students are getting stuck in a cycle of retakes. When asked why they pursue retakes, approximately 52% of students indicated they wanted to get the highest points possible, and 52% of the parents indicated their students took retakes so they could get the highest points possible. If we go back to the question asking parents what was most important about grades, approximately 13% indicated that the most important thing to them concerning grades was that grades earned are the highest possible so their student can get into a selective or highly selective college or university. This desire for more points was confirmed by North Campus students when they were interviewed during the principal student advisory meetings held over lunch periods prior to winter break. In these lunch period meetings, students in advanced placement and honors classes reported retaking assessments at much higher rates than students in other courses. These students also reported that they would continue to retake assessments to earn the most points possible. When asked on the survey if they would have taken less retakes if all A's were counted at the same value, 70% of staff respondents said no, there would not have been less retakes, even if all A's were weighed at the same value. 20% of student respondents said they can't even answer this question because they didn't access retakes this past semester. And 42% of the students said yes, they would have taken less retakes if this was the situation, leaving approximately 38% saying no. Approximately 42% of parents said yes, their student would have accessed less retakes, and 47% of parents said no, they would not have taken less retakes. Both students and parents were almost split in their responses as to whether this would change the number of retakes taken. However, when asked during the principal student advisory meeting if all A's were counted as the same value in the gradebook, would you continue to retake assessments at the same rate? The majority of students said no. One junior in multiple AP classes said, and I quote, "I would be relieved because you should be proud of a 91. It is an A." Going back to look at the last belief statement, approximately 91% of students and approximately 94% of parents agreed or strongly agreed that students need multiple ways to demonstrate their learning in each class, meaning a paper, a project, other things than a traditional test. Approximately 86% of staff respondents also agreed. The responses to this survey item further support the clarification added to this semester concerning the various methods that can and should be utilized to assess student learning. Overall, the survey data demonstrated agreement in regard to what a grade should represent, which is what a student has learned. It also demonstrated a dislike among some parents and staff for the new practices that will allow a grade to accurately communicate student learning. As we move forward, we will need to bridge this gap by finding additional ways to assess and communicate the non-cognitive factors that are important and essential to student development. Scott's now going to tell you about where we are headed.
So we'd never intended at this point to stop here and say we are finished. That's never been our goal. What we have been trying to do all along is to move more and more toward consistency and to provide more and more clarity for grading. We are encouraged by the data that we see that we're on the right track. And as you can see in this particular slide, as far as grading practices go, we continue to focus on common practices with varied nuances. We understand that some courses are a little different than others, but we need to make sure that our practices are consistent. Our course teams are really doing a nice job in this direction. We just need to make sure, though, that our course teams are consistent, not because there's a majority that wants to do it one way, but because the team for the best interest of the students are making those decisions. As far as the grading scales go, we do continue to have those 3 scales. At one point, we had hoped to move to an A to F scale rather soon. You'll see in a moment why we're not quite ready to go in that direction, partly because there's a lot that has to go into making a major shift like that. And as we are looking at the grading scales, we are very consistent in what we've been doing, and we will continue in that direction. Again, our grade book is pretty significantly focused at this point with 3 different options. Again, we would like to move to a skill concept model. There are some steps that need to happen before we get there. So again, we'll continue to look in that direction. And lastly, with grade reporting, if we do make that change to a skilled concept gradebook setup, we need a new report card. We're not anywhere near proposing a new report card or making that shift. So we have some ongoing objectives, but we also know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done prior to getting there. And our A to F teams that have currently been piloting this shift have shared a lot of really important information with us, not only in what it takes to get there, but also the challenges that lie ahead. We do have a little video here by 2 of our teachers who are going to explain to you their A to F journey, and we'll go ahead and play that for you now.
Not hearing sound.
She's working on making it work in the back.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bigelow, and I'm with Gabby Williams, and we are going to present to you the A through F grading system that we have piloted in our English 3 and English 4 classes. So to begin, when we were asked to implement the A through F grading this year, Gabby and I got together and we decided that we needed to start from scratch. We started by going through all of our curriculum for both English 3 and English 4, and we reviewed every single summative assignment that we had created in the past, and we realigned our formative assessments to meet that, to help us with teaching for the summative assessments. We also dedicated time to revising and deleting past practice. Unfortunately, this took a lot of time. I would say the biggest drawback of this grading system was having to we spent 40+ hours going through each and every summative assessment to make sure that what we were teaching is aligned to the Common Core standards and the skills and concepts that we wanted our students to learn.
I'm Gabby Williams. Here's an example of a grade book from a teacher's perspective. So last semester we focused on the skills of reading comprehension, inferencing, citing evidence, and a little bit of character development at the end of the semester. So as you'll see, we labeled all of our summatives, and there's a matching formative in red below as well. And as Jen said, we wanted to make sure that we have formatives addressing skills that we were going to have on the test as well. So on the left, you'll see reading informational. On the right, you'll see reading literature. We also have a writing section as well on the grade book that you'll see here. So the numbers and letters align with Common Core state standards, but we were really focusing on the skills that you'll see in the parentheses. So we aligned these, the writing skills we focused on were clear and coherent writing, providing evidence and analysis in writing, and also narrative writing. And here's an example of a parent or student view. So you can see our 3 categories here: reading informational, reading literature, and writing. So it's really nice for the kids to see and the parents to see exactly what they're getting in each section. So this student, for example, is getting a B in reading literature and also getting a B in writing. And then in the circle above, you'll see that that equals out to a B overall in class. And here is their look for reading literature broken down by all of the summatives that make up that B.
So in terms of the impact on the classroom and instruction, we have, especially in the English content area, we have experienced a lot of success. What we have found through this process is that the A through F grading system has helped really guide meaningful instruction and skills and concept. It's very skills and concept focused. We did have to create rubrics for everything that we do. So although that was time consuming, the rubrics have really created an avenue for constructive feedback to be provided to these students based on the different skills and concepts that are being taught. All of our assessments are now aligned to the target skills and concepts, and this has helped us to focus on those important skills that we want our students to learn. We also found that students seem to be more focused on the learning target and concepts and skills, and are no longer really concerned about points on formulas and points in terms of grades.
So we teach a supported section or supported sections of English. So the students in our classrooms have IEPs. And this new grading system has really helped with updating our IEP goals. So you'll see an example of a goal up top, and you can see that we align those with the skills that we are teaching directly in class. So this goal is aligned with evidence and inferencing and comprehension. So case managers or anybody looking for updates on that specific goal for the student can go to our grade books and see exactly how they're doing on each skill. So you'll see again the same students' grade book, and you can see for citing evidence and inferencing, they got a B on 9-10, and they got an A on 11-9. So you can see the progress directly, whether it's a parent or student or case manager, and it's really helped streamline updating these goals for everybody involved. And I had a teacher email me a couple weeks ago too, in their testimonials at the bottom. They said that your detailed English grade book with skills broken down and separately evaluated just saved the day in an IEP meeting. So not only is it helpful and very clear for the students and the teachers, but also for the case managers and parents looking at this at home.
So when we asked our students how they liked the difference between the point-based grades and the A through F grading system, most of our students were very pleased with the shift. One student talked about how they liked how each question had a skill listed on the test, and how when they received their grade, they knew specifically what area they were struggling with. And another student talked about how it gave them more confidence knowing that they didn't completely fail the test, but maybe had to focus more on a specific skill. So these were just 2 student testimonials, but we did get a lot of positive feedback from our students. I think if we could add, there were a lot of positives with implementing this grading system, but I think in terms of content, or the English content, it's probably a lot easier for us because our area is a little bit more subjective than some of the other content areas. I would say the biggest concern or drawback or con was the fact that we had to front load so many hours of work, and we continue to do so each week, trying to align second semester's work with our summits.
So we also talked to another teacher who teaches psychology, both AP Psychology and Intro to Psychology. We had a video for that as well. It is 13 minutes, and we really want to respect everybody's time today. The takeaways of his presentation are on the screens right now, and they really mirror what you just heard. So it's not so much that this worked in special ed, will it work elsewhere? It works in AP and as well in the Intro to Psychology. The benefits that the psychology team saw was that it's not about points, it's about skill and concept mastery. The curriculum allows for enough opportunity to master each skill and concept because they're clearly reported. So again, there are fewer skills and concepts. All of the, what people consider to be sort of the meat and potatoes, all of the things that you learn in the class help demonstrate those skills, help demonstrate those concepts. The example given is if you were to do Spanish-American War in a history class, you would learn about Spanish-American War, there'd be a couple multiple choice questions, and that would be the end of it. In this version, you would use the Spanish-American War to explain the concept of conflict, and that would be the concept, and then you would use your ability to read closely primary source documents and analyze history to make an argument about conflict in the Spanish-American War. So it kind of turns things a little on their head, but that content is crucial to being able to demonstrate your understanding the skill or the concept. They found that the criteria for success are clear and consistent. You heard that also about the rubrics, and that increased student ownership of learning comes along with it because students are partnering their learning with their teachers, they're self-assessing, they're peer assessing, they're setting goals, they're acknowledging the growth over time, they can chart their own growth over time. It's not so much that I got a grade on this test, I don't know what it covered, we're on to the next thing. They're able to say, oh, I'm getting better on this skill. They're able to chart it, and it's also in their grade book that way. It's decreased their retakes in AP Psychology and Intro to Psychology because an A is an A. A student's not getting a 92 and doing a retake because who knows, next time it might be harder and I need those extra 4 or 5 points in this grade so I don't have to worry about the next grade. They've got the A is booked, they're ready to move on. There's also increased collective efficacy amongst the teacher team because they're in it together. They're designing this together. When they have their PLC meetings, they're talking about student growth. They're not talking about other things that would take you away from what we believe should be the goal of the course. Certainly the same challenges that you heard on the video were shared by the AP group. The team had to revamp its entire curriculum. There had to be a paradigm shift because the teachers have to treat the content as a vehicle to teach the skill, like I just explained. And students and families have to see that growth is toward a level as the focus as opposed to earning points. Because you're continually improving the skill or the concept rather than adding more and more points. And lastly, the final semester grades and multiple choice assessments still require a number for the final determination of a letter grade. AP courses do have AP tests, and those AP tests often do have multiple choice. So there are some areas where there are some challenges where things come across. But overall, they really felt empowered by the ability to do this work. They shared also some student testimonials. I like how formative assessments are used to help a student, not make them feel more stressed out about a quiz or assignment that will count in the grade book. Adriana Vasic said our skill-based course makes it clear what you need to study more, whether it's define, apply, or FRQ. It allows us to show our understanding in more than one way. Abby says, I do like skill-based courses because it's easier to identify what I need help with. I'm accustomed to the A to F scale because it's been in place since I was in 4th grade. And then Noah says, I like skill-based courses because they better reflect your learning. It helps me see where I need to improve. So again, as we talk about where we're headed next, this is sort of the holy grail. This is what we're looking to ensure, that those grades represent learning, students know why they're earning their grades, and that they're not caught in a retake cycle of formative summatives to capture points, but they know what they need to work on for the next opportunity. So we have a lot of work to do, but we definitely wanted to make sure you heard essentially the halftime report of year one, and get try to answer some of your questions, and also build any questions or concerns into what we do going forward, and even to some degree in our strategic planning process, because so much of the data that you heard is a part of that process.
Couple notes on that. So we were really a game time decision as late as this afternoon based on time, which part of the teacher testimonials we were going to include. So that's not in your hard copy packet, but I'll share that with the board tomorrow, the entire PowerPoint. The other piece is the data from the environmental scan that's included in there. Our strategic plan team meets Thursday, 90 people, to look at 4 different presentations. The environmental scan, which includes this, plus all of the other survey data from January. And then we have 3 teams that are presenting on student learning, on climate and culture, and on resources. And all of that data, all the data included within that presentation will be on our strategic plan website, probably by early next week. So I just want to highlight that about all the information that's in your hard copy. The other thing too, and it's been said a couple times, is that our teachers have done a tremendous amount of work and struggled through a lot to get to the point we're at. And we're proud and extremely appreciative of what they're doing to make this work, and knowing that we have a lot of work ahead. So I want to highlight that and just say what we've said all along, and I think Scott mentioned it earlier. This isn't the end point. It's sort of the halfway point, but we, every single semester, are going to look at the data. We're going to make adjustments if we have to, and keep this moving, keep it evolving to the place where we want it to go. And again, I can't say enough about how proud we are of every single teacher and leader who's been involved in this work. The grading task force, early on, we had research committees. We've got teacher teams that have been doing this work. And so it's, we're essentially 5-ish years in, and much more work to do, but really proud of where we're at.
I'm sure we have some questions. Yep, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Thanks, everyone. That was a very thorough update. Really appreciative of that. Appreciate the historic context around the need for consistency. I heard that loud and clear. And certainly the responsiveness that you took feedback first semester and are trying some new things second semester. A couple things from the data stuck out to me where there's divergence across these 3 very important constituencies. I think I noticed in retakes, maybe a divergence with the staff versus the students, and then also with the formatives and homework. And I know everyone agreed we ended up in kind of the right place, but I think those are important subtopics, and I'm curious, as time goes on second semester, if we'll see this increase in the number of summatives kind of take away some of the concern around formatives not being graded and the concern around retakes being offered. Maybe they'll kind of solve each other. That'll be interesting to see how feedback continues, and I know this whole team will continue to listen and seek feedback and input, so I deeply appreciate that. One question, maybe Scott, for you on the A through F scale, or actually it's an observation with some students in the pilot. My one concern, and I think it's somewhat significant, maybe I'm still growing in my understanding here, but historically, if you had a student who got B's, let's say B's on everything, and you had another student who got half A's, half B's, maybe one more B, and a student who got half C's, half B's, maybe one more B, you'd have a B plus, a B, and a B minus on the transcript. Now, for the GPA, you'd still get a 3, and that's mathematical, and I know that. But unfortunately, I think with this pilot, with the A through F, all 3 students get a B, which is already kind of, well, you've taken away the distinguishment on the transcript, and I think as more and more colleges and universities kind of push for a test-optional approach, you no longer can distinguish that B-plus student who got brought down to a B in their minds perhaps from that B-minus student because they all say B. And that's my one concern that I saw this semester with some students in that pilot, is that lack of differentiation. And again, maybe there's some understanding that I still need to gather. But that's my one concern, is that we've kind of taken away from the distinguishment across 3 very different students, which is now on their transcript.
Sure. Yeah, it becomes a philosophical conversation, honestly, because if a grade is a measure of what a student has learned, the question is that student who has earned a B at some point, when they've gotten C's before because they struggled, does that mean that B isn't worth as much as the B that the kid got who just right out of the bat got the B? They've both shown the same mastery of the content at a certain point in time. And the high water mark of their mastery is equivalent. I don't think it's our job to sort. I think it's our job to teach. And we want to make sure that we can move as many students as we can, as high and as far as they can, and that grade is an indication of what they've learned. I think where students distinguish themselves is in the courses that they choose to take, the way that they challenge themselves in those courses, and then ultimately the performance that they have on those grades. I know I personally have 3 kids, 3 different students. They learn in different ways. One's a fast learner, one's a slow learner, one's if I like it, I do well. If I don't, I don't, right? And so, but ultimately, if they're in the same course and they earn the same grade, that means they've learned the same amount. It's not how they got to the learning, it's that they achieved. And we want our grades to be a measure of achievement. So I think to some degree, we had in this school a very clear rank of students. We had GPA ranking. We had all sorts of games that kids played to affect their GPA. We've wiped a lot of that out, and kids are not competing against one another in a classroom anymore. They're learning in a classroom together. And that has changed the atmosphere of a lot of our higher level courses. You're not looking at the kid across from you trying to figure out how you can get a few more points than them. You're all trying to get the highest grade you possibly can. So I don't know if that fully changes a mind or anything. That's why I think it's philosophical, because our goal here, I know people like to use the word grade inflation. If we lay out what a student's supposed to learn, we teach it, we provide the supports that they need, we give them the opportunity to demonstrate learning on multiple occasions and in multiple modalities, and they show us that they learn it, it shouldn't matter. They've learned it. So if more students are able to learn it, I say we've done a better job preparing them rather than saying, well, we gave you the test in October, you weren't ready, that was the grade you got, we're moving on, too bad. The kid who catches it faster, who has a tutor, or who had benefits that you didn't have, they're going to get a higher grade. That's just the way that life works or the world works. That's not how we see what we should be doing to ensure that all students achieve Vita Plena.
And maybe and appreciate that, maybe it's just an adjustment, but I don't know if it's an adjustment every student likes, right? If a student normally would have gotten a B+, and now they get a B, that's taking something away from them, and it's on their permanent transcript. And but if you're the B- student, you're thrilled because you got a B in the again, with half your grades being C's and B's. And
that's if we stay with a numerical grading system, because when there is no plus or minus, you don't know if you have a B+ or B-. You know that you have shown the B degree of mastery of this particular skill. It's not that you did it better than someone else, or you did it faster than someone else, or you got to it slower than someone else. You got a B, and everyone got a B here, or got an A, or got a C, and the criteria are clear. So they would never know whether they got a plus or a minus. And to quote the student that said in that focus group, I got a 91, I got an A. Well, when you have an A, you have an A, and so that's all we're going to worry about. One of the things that we didn't like about some of the A to F grading programs is it would say an A is a 95, because then some kids were saying, well, I just lost 5 points. It's like, no, because you're still in the point mindset. You got an A, right? So the more that we make that shift, it's to the mindset of achievement. You've achieved an A level of work. Or you've achieved, some schools do away with grades altogether. You are at a 4, you're at a 3, you're at a 2. Well, what's the first thing a kid does? They translate it to a grade, right? So we're like, well, let's just sort of cut out the middleman here and just make sure we're moving more and more about how we clarify what the outcomes are for a course.
Thanks.
Thank you for all the information. I appreciate it. It's a lot of data, which I think all of us appreciate it, and we know that the data is very important. Unfortunately, we didn't see this data beforehand, so it's a lot to digest in this setting. So I probably will have more questions after I have the appropriate time needed to carefully and thoughtfully look through it, which I think probably all of us on the board, expect that in these discussions. Katie, your presentation had a lot of conclusions, a lot of information you were drawing, comparing questions and so forth, but it was too much to digest as you're going through it. So if you could send that to, I'm sure everyone would like it. Likewise, I'd like to see the videos. We can't read the screens from here. We didn't see that information ahead of time.
Yeah, I'll
So
share
it would
this
be
tomorrow with you. I'll share the
very
PowerPoint with you
important.
guys.
And I'm sure that, at least from my perspective, I'm sure that that will raise additional questions that we can talk about next week at our regular action meeting when we revisit this. A couple of specific questions I have right now is during the course of both last year and then during first semester, we heard a lot of concerns from teachers, students, and parents. And I appreciate the time and effort that went into looking at what was happening, looking at how course corrections could be made, and moving into second semester, applying some of those. What will be done during this semester to garner feedback from teachers, students, and parents to understand if those changes are acting in the way that we would hope that they would, and that those changes were actually successful changes? That's my first question.
So that's going to go through the grading task force.
Right. So we've, from the start, we had essentially a grading task force. We've continued that group. We meet about every 2 weeks. We've just begun talking about the topics in particular for the spring and any changes we need to for the fall. We helped put together that original survey trying to consider what information we need to gather, and what we're also getting from that group, because it's made up of teachers and administrators, is feedback from teams, from teaching teams. So that's been really helpful. When we showed them the video today, for example, about A to F, the teachers who taught A to F said there's some really great information in there that I experienced also when I was working with A to F. So what we found from that group, the changes to second semester went through that particular group. So we actually spent probably 6 hours or so having long conversations about the not only the challenges we were hearing about, but also then looking at some initial data and really having long discussions about what levers would make the right movement and change. From what we're hearing, again, this is anecdotal at this point, but it's also very early in the semester, there seems to be less of reliance on retakes. Not saying that they're gone, but there seems to be more opportunities for students to demonstrate learning. There have been more summatives available, and that students are not caught in a retake cycle, which is interesting. When we did look at that data, only about 17% of students said they got caught in that retake cycle, but that was what we heard a lot of. I think by having that formative, the majority of formatives up there ahead of time, that sort of cut some of those off. So again, right now, everything's anecdotal. When we get to the mid-quarter, we'll be looking for much more input. We're also going to be sending out a survey. We've already begun it through 5 essentials that gets at some of that information as well. So we'll have some data in early March that we'll also take a part of.
Okay, so I thank you. I hear that, there is going to be an effort, like halfway through the semester to really kind of garner some feedback to understand if this is working. My concern, and I think the concern that we heard from students, teachers, and parents from first semester is that there was nothing to do about first semester. We couldn't remedy anything. That was what it is. But for second semester, we hope that these changes will make a difference. So I'm hoping that if they are not working to the degree that you would have hoped and that our teams would have hoped, that we can still make some course corrections before the end of second semester to make sure that we're trying to push in and understand what's working and not working before we move into next year.
I think I would respond to that, though, to say the concerns that came up at the end of the first semester, one thing we wanted to do was make the adjustments, but then measure the impact. And I think it's been clear that there wasn't an impact. There wasn't the impact that was thought in terms of a negative experience for students first semester. And so certainly at the end of this semester, we would collect second semester grade data and make sure that that is speaking to us in the same way that it has been. So we'll continue to do that.
Okay. And I hear what you're saying, and I looked at the grades. That piece of data we did have in our packet ahead of time, so we were able to look at that. The one thing that kind of resonates with me, though, is it doesn't give us a snapshot of what it took to get to those grades. So we don't really have a reference point to understand how many retakes were put in there to really, how many times did students have to take it to improve their grade, nor do we have any inputs. We certainly have heard, and I know firsthand, that our community employs a lot of tutoring in some cases for our students to help them in these classes. We have no metric to understand how that plays into it. So I don't know what the answer is to that, but those grades in and of themselves, I don't feel tell the whole story. And that's part of the flux of I think, of a new system and a new change. So anything that we can do to really understand, what is behind moving to these grades. The one question that I kind of flagged in the survey data is, I want it to get the highest grade possible. It's easy to infer by that statement that when somebody says, I want it to get the highest grade possible, that it's moving from a B to an A, when in actuality, that statement could very well mean, I did poorly on the first summative, so I retook it because I want it to get the highest grade possible. So I think we have to keep that in mind. Scott, can you explain the statement of feedback? If feedback is given, and I may have totally misunderstood this, but if feedback is given as related and during the course, that may affect whether or not the students have an opportunity to retake? I'm not sure I understand that.
I'm not sure either. Sorry.
I can address that.
Thanks, Jen.
So in the instance of when we're talking about multiple forms of assessment being used as summative assessments, we are using projects or different types of presentations. What that statement means is that if feedback is given along the way as students are developing their projects, their presentations as summative assessments, then a retake does not have to be given. So a little bit different than a traditional summative assessment in that, as they might be long-term assignments, presentations, and projects, and as teachers are working with students throughout the learning process, they're giving that feedback along the way. In that case, then a retake does not have to be issued.
Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean that if feedback is given on a formative, that justifies the ability to not be able to retake a summative.
It does not on a formative.
It's a very specific type of scenario where it's project-based learning more, where there's a project in place and there's a pathway towards the end and feedback is given along the way.
That's exactly right. So on the whole purpose, right, of formatives, you just said it, we want students to have practice, get a ton of feedback, and then have that opportunity to ultimately demonstrate their learning on that summative. So exactly how you said it is accurate.
And I just have two more questions. I apologize for taking so much time, but I think this is really important, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity for us to revisit this. I appreciate that there are more opportunities, more summatives being utilized in the grade than there were first semester. I've talked with Dr. Waterman about this. It makes a lot of sense. A quiz can be used just as much as a formative as it is a summative. If it's used as a formative at the front end of content teaching to understand where the class is at, yes, that's very much a formative. But along the way, as students are moving through units, that seems much more like a summative. So I'm really glad that correction has been made. We've talked a lot about consistency, and I guess I'm wondering if there's any expectation among course teams to have a similar amount of consistency in either the types of or the number of summative opportunities students have along the way of their pathway of learning.
Yes.
Yes?
That is,
Okay.
yeah.
So you wouldn't expect to see any classes that have, at the end of a semester, like 4 grades versus the same course, but taught by another teacher where they have 12 grades?
That's exactly right, Dawn. That consistency, we would look at among and between teachers on the same course team, correct?
Excellent. Last question is kind of a statement. When these changes were made, I know that there was a communication put out by Dr. Waterman, maybe you, Dr. Tyrell. Since the start of the semester, I, as a parent, have not received any communications from the teachers as to how things may or may not have changed in the course. I hear stuff from students, and there still seems to be quite a bit of confusion. One point of confusion is the scenario of, I gave you feedback on this formative, so no, you can't take that summative. I think it would be really helpful if you had your teachers put out some communications about how things are looking for second semester, where the changes may have been made.
Thanks, Dawn. Appreciate that comment, and we'll work with our division chairs and our teachers as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I have a question, just to Julie's point with the A through F system. When we look at that system, I do think that there is a difference when you look at the Bs, or any of the grades, because outside of LT in college application processes and with colleges, they all are looking at the grades based upon pluses and minuses. And so a B and a B plus is not the same when we're looking at it in the realities of the real world right now. So how do you start to adjust and prepare, students and parents for those realities when these grades would go in front of college admissions?
So that's a very good question. It's one that we certainly want to make sure we had an answer to as well. So there are a number of schools throughout the Chicagoland area who've been making changes to their grading practices, and there's a group called CADCA, the Chicago Area Directors of Curriculum and Assessment. We get together monthly. We brought in the admissions officers from the University of Illinois, the University of Chicago, and DePaul University, and we asked them that very question. They said there's so much variance throughout the state of Illinois as to who has pluses and minuses that we use them if they're there, we don't if they aren't. And then what we do, what they also said what that they do at their colleges, because we have 3 levels weighted this way and someone else has 2 levels weighted another way, and some people have honors not worth as much as AP, they strip all that away and they look at the core grade. The grade is the clearest indication, they said, of student performance. They'd strip off pluses and minuses, or they'll strip off whatever the levels that we have, and they'll stack it up based on the courses you took and look at it that way. So they know that there's no consistency among high schools for any of this. And what they do is they try to strip as many of those things away as possible to try to compare like to like. So if you put the pluses and minuses on there, they may use them, they may not. If they're not on there, they can't use them, and so they will treat every student similarly. So if a student got a B, they got a B, they got a B. If they got a B plus, a B, B minus, they might sort them, they might not. Because the other thing that's happening in college entrances is they're very concerned about equity, and they're worried that a plus or minus might be based somewhat on an advantage a student had or didn't have. And so they're looking to other things beyond just the grades as far as how they're assessing a student placement. So we were really surprised to hear that, to be honest, because we assumed that they were looking at a lot of fine detail. They said, look, we get a lot of information. We're looking at the global picture of the kid, and if they're getting A's in the content area they want to be a major in, that shows that they have the potential. If they're getting Cs in the areas that they don't want to be a major in, that might be a red flag because maybe they're not as consistent across the board. Those are the trends that they're looking for rather than the difference between a B plus and a B minus. And they're never going to look at you, me, or someone else together and wondering why you got a B plus and I got a B minus. They just want to know kind of how to strip that all away and create a profile of a student.
I think you just made the point that I was trying to make, which is that if those institutions have pluses and minuses, I think you said they use them.
Some
And
do.
in an extreme example, a student who gets all B pluses their whole time at LT and one that gets all B minuses, going to A through F, they look exactly the same, which is already achieved by the GPA math, right? That there's just a 3 for a B. So just taking away an ability for another outside party to make a distinguishment between two different performances is my concern with the A through F.
And my concern there would be that the student who got the B minus would be penalized, and that may not be an accurate reflection of what they actually attained. It's just the way the points added up, and I think we'd be doing our students a disservice.
So if we send our students grades that don't reflect the plus and minus, the college is looking at it straight as a B?
Correct.
Then, okay.
Right, but a lot of colleges are publishing their GPAs on plus and minuses of averages of what students are who are getting into their universities.
Well, true. Well, but they'll take what we give them, right?
But I think that matters, though. I mean, our students, we were saying, that was a conversation with 3 colleges.
Correct.
And with 70% of our students are planning to go off into higher education, like I think, and looking a lot of different places, I think that's a good start to have that conversation. But, and I appreciate the goal. I mean, we want the kids to be measured on learning. I guess, is it, as you were walking through and you were talking about the numerical grading system, is it an either or? I mean, the rubrics that everybody is using and being able to give the feedback to the student in a point system, and maybe it's, I don't know, but do you have to get rid of the point system to still achieve the learning and understand the skills and where you are along the way?
It's a very good question, and we would say yes, because the students are motivated by the points in a point system, and they're motivated by the skills and outcomes in an A to F system. And so if we want our students to be motivated by points, we tweak what we're doing now, and we have students getting a 92 retaking a test to get a 94 or 95. If we are measuring based on skills and outcomes, and a student is demonstrating an A level of mastery of a skill or an outcome, they know they have an A, and they move on, and they don't go back and perseverate on 2 or 3 or 4 points. The question is whether that then harms them as far as getting into a particular college. They have an A in a course at a highly rated institution like LT that has multiple levels of challenges, and that student has demonstrated it accordingly.
I think maybe what I'm hearing is it might be beneficial to get more information about the college admission process. And we know Scott mentioned the 3 universities that we've looked at, but we can come back with some more information about that from a broader assortment of colleges and universities. So we can work on that.
That would be great, and especially outside of Illinois. I mean, we saw the report of all the different places our students go. So really to take a broader snapshot nationally, at least, would be, I think, very important.
And there is that research out there. We can certainly get that, because that's something that our college and career counseling department has been a part of and has been able to gather that information. We actually used information from that group to eliminate our ranking because they were saying how it actually was hurting kids.
I'm going to.
No, go.
Because it's, a big concern I have is, I understand if a child has a A and it's a 92, is it a 92 or is it a 94? My worry is more that C student or the B student, and if my student has a 78 versus a 72, there's a big motivation to try to up their game and try to get to the B level. And if you don't know, you can look at it and go, I've got a C or I've got a B. And I think if you know you're at an 82 or you're at an 88, it gives a different motivation. And I think it's important for somebody to see, you know, I'm right on the cusp. I'm at 78. I can work this much harder and possibly push myself into that B category. If I think I'm just at a C, I might just kind of go, well, I've got a C. I don't even know what I can do. I don't know how close I am or how far I am.
You would actually know what you would do because the rubrics are there, and the rubrics will say what you'd need to do to get a B. So right now what often happens is a kid who has that 72 does the math, and they're like, well, I got to get a 95 on this thing to get a B in this class. There's no way. So they don't try it. When they have a rubric that says here's where a C is and here's what B work is, they know exactly what they need to do to get the B work. They don't need to get A work to average in with the C work to move a percentage up to a B, because that's all point manipulation. They know that I've mastered this skill, I've not mastered this one. In order for me to master this skill, I have to do these things on this rubric. When I do those things, I get that grade. I don't have to do way more than those things to make up for the bad test I had earlier that gave me my 72, because that's in a point system. I have a C, it's telling me the reason I don't have a B is because I haven't included clarity of thought, I haven't included multiple citations of sources, and I haven't analyzed an argument. If I do all three of those things, I now have a B. I don't have to worry about what the C was. It doesn't matter if it's 72, 71, 79.5. I now have a B.
But it's not just the most recent grade that is your grade, right? Aren't we, isn't it, what you just described sounds like we go with the most recent grade and that's your grade for the semester, which I don't think
No,
is what you're.
but you were saying there's no way that they would know what to do. They would know what to do, and they would know what they need to do either on a retake, which would replace the grade, or on the next assignment, which would put them at a much higher grade. There are grading programs that would give you more credit, so to speak, for the most recent attempts. So again, you've learned it now and you're demonstrating it more frequently now in these multiple summative assessments. So now that grade is your grade, even though you started out much lower. But you do know what you need to do to get to the next level in that system, which is why the teachers said it was so hard for them to put together, because they have to create those rubrics. They have to set those expectations. They have to have that information for those students. It's a total different way of thinking about grades and grading. You don't think about points anymore. You think about the skills and the outcomes.
Right, but is that done in colleges and universities, in the majority of them today?
The colleges and universities, I would really be challenged to figure out how some professors grade. I think they give you very few opportunities to be graded. They don't exactly necessarily tell you what you need to do in order to get a grade. So we would want our students to walk out of here as prepared as possible with the core content that they've demonstrated mastery and ready to go out into that world.
We probably see a pretty wide variety of ways that colleges and university professors grade, assess, formative, summatives. There's probably a million different examples of how that's done at the college level as well. But that's also, information we can collect.
Our dual credit courses, I don't think follow, or at least in the foreign languages, don't follow A through F currently, right?
Right.
It depends on the schools. Some will allow it. Some will allow us to grade A through F for the high school grade and use their grading scale for the college grade. Again, it depends on the college. We are working currently with 5 different institutions.
Yeah.
But back to the point, there's a couple things I wanted to, for clarity, I wanted to ask. The 17 teams, that means there's 17 courses, right? I mean, you say teams, but that's essentially a class, right?
Correct.
Okay. How many classes, and how many courses?
That's a good question for Katie.
How many?
So it's 17 course teams, so it's 17 courses.
Okay, but then, I mean, how many courses do we offer? A lot, right? This is only like,
We
I'm
offer-
trying to get a
Yes.
scale here, perspective of.
In our APG, there's over 300 courses.
300, yeah. Okay. And also noting that there's the time that gets put into that 40 hours. When a course team is working on that, is that a collaborative effort with them, or is it, okay, I didn't.
Yeah, ideally, it's a collaborative effort, and it really should be done prior to the start of the school year. So the teams that were referenced here, one had a summer workshop and the other one came together on their own time over the summer to go ahead and plan the way that their course would be designed. So that's why we know that there's not a definitive time frame that we could put on moving to A to F, because it will take a significant amount of time, and also I think support on the administrative side to help the teams make the curricular changes that they need to truly make this work for students as well as themselves.
Right. And I appreciate, because you guys have supplied some examples of how this, you know, this grading is working, the grading protocols. But in a class setting too, one thing I haven't heard much of, and I was just kind of curious, like what happens in situations, or are we still doing group projects in classes? And how does that work? Because I feel like that is a component that is very important to our students as far as how they'll go out and take those skills and translate into any situation they're in, working or in college future. But I would like to know a little bit more, because we're not talking about how, we don't grade group projects then.
You want to take it?
Whoever wants it.
We are still encouraging group projects, and students absolutely should be working in groups, because that is a 21st century skill in regards to collaboration. What we want to make sure, though, is that we are still assessing whether each individual student has the knowledge and skills that they're being asked to demonstrate. So we still want them to get an individual grade within the context of their group project. Does that make sense?
Does. I just wondered, like, I guess I'm trying to figure out how that would look, like what that would look like, what would be an example of that, you know, then.
So basically you'd have the, rubric and task outline for the particular project. And if each individual had a portion that they're contributing, that portion is being assessed and that a grade going to them, as opposed to, personally, I've been in a group where, one person kind of shoulders the work and everybody gets the grade. That's what we're trying to avoid.
That's important. That's helpful too. Anybody else? And, it's just, the only thing I'd like to add is every time you guys provide real examples that really help set the, sort of level set for us what's actually happening and taking place. I don't think anybody gets really good feedback from their own students at home, like what's going on in class. So it's helpful when you do that for us. But, and a lot of times it's, again, I think as the teachers pointed out, it reflects that it's something really concrete and understandable to grasp for things that are subjective or have opportunities for arguments and things like that, like, English classes. But seeing an example play out in math is always kind of helpful too. So I think where we have more opportunities to do those kinds of things, if you can give us some insight to that at some point, that would be really, really beneficial.
Yeah.
Can I ask just one more kind of overarching question, and I'll try to be brief. I know we went from inconsistency within teams and courses to what feels like consistency across the whole school. Is there any continued refinement where perhaps a course, and I'll pick on like something like math, where you build skills, I think, typically, where perhaps if some of the changes don't work out that well, perhaps homework does become a very minor part of the grade, or conversely in like an English class. I had forgotten that there's not any portion of the grade for class participation, and I think something like English or some of the social studies courses thrive on and need students to talk about the book or their thoughts on philosophy, and to not have any tangible benefit for motivating a kid to participate in one of those courses feels like it might be something that would be concerning to some. And again, I think math, very kind of literal, you don't really need to participate, no offense to the math teachers. It's helpful if people do, but some of the courses just thrive on that classroom discussion. And I just wonder if there's any, over time, some refinement to give teams more independence and ability to kind of influence some of those small components, or is it really just a one-size-fits-all that we're going for? Because I know there's benefits to both.
Sure.
Scott, can I have you pause for a second? Excuse me, we're trying to have a working session here. If you have conversations you'd like to have, you can take them out in the hallway, please. Do not disrupt the meeting. You need to go to the back of the, you can go out in the hallway if you want to have some discussions. This is an important working session. And if you can't do that, then you will be asked to leave. Scott, please continue.
Julie, I appreciate that question. I think as we worked with the grading implementation committee, I think that we started to talk about some differences in courses as well. And I think your point about will we revisit, will we look at that? I think that's what we're always trying to do, right? Look at how things are working, get that feedback from staff, students, families. Also look at the grade data where we're at. We're looking at retakes. I appreciate the comment about the lift to get to the grades. I think that's something else that we're digging into as well. So will we continue to revisit it? Absolutely. And we'll continue to look. And when we talk with the grading implementation committee, we were talking about differences among and across courses. And I'll give you just one quick example here. When we talked to some students, and then we talked with the staff as well, social studies, right? We talked about social studies courses where kids felt like staff were doing an awesome job of giving a representative group of summative assessments, right? So we have a traditional test, we might have a Socratic seminar discussion, we might have some sort of written prompt as well. There were some areas that may not have been that far along, and so we're working with those areas right now on diversifying the types of assessments that they're given. So we realize that there are differences among content areas, and we're working with our teachers as well in the areas that we've adjusted for this semester, and I think we'll continue to look at feedback and look at our implementation throughout the semester, this semester as well.
Great, thank you. And again, commending you, the whole team, for continuing to put forth, new thought and also be so responsive to feedback and continue. I just encourage you to continue to take it, and I look forward to the next report. Thanks.
Thank you. All right.
So
Allison?
So one thing that I saw, and I was just looking for the option 1 or option A and B, and I guess I'm wondering, as we have this discussion tonight, what's the plan are you guys planning on moving forward with this, with anything more this semester, with the fall? What's the game plan as far as timing and?
So that's the topic at our next meeting with the implementation team, really talking about what do we need to have in place for staff as far as training for the fall, what sort of tweaks do we need to make or consider making going forward. So it's kind of early to decide if we're making any changes for next year, but we want to make sure we get those conversations going about, do we need any summer workshop time? Do we need time for support for teachers over the summer, any changes that would have to happen in the fall. So, that's definitely a part of those conversations.
I guess I would my worry or my opinion is just be careful of, life is crazy these days, and I feel like sitting and being in one static environment is okay, and we don't need to keep pushing and changing when it comes to the kids and how they're handling different things. So maybe
we agree.
We take a breath on this one and
pause on some variables.
We agree. I know at one point there was some discussion of moving quickly to an A to F, and knowing what it takes to get there, we know we are not going there quickly. And again, the teams that are there want to be there and have done a lot of the work. There are some teams who are there who realize they haven't done that work and are reconsidering. So this is not anything we want to push. We're working on a communication to the faculty about that specifically. We wanted to share it with you tonight because it's a part of our implementation, but like we said, there's only 17 courses doing that. The rest are still in a points-oriented model where we are trying to clarify that the grade measures learning, not behaviors. And so the more we can refine that and the more people are comfortable with that, the more that they'll understand where they could go next. And that's up to us to scaffold that. But that also requires a lot of curriculum review and a lot of analysis of skills and courses. And as you heard from those teachers and what you'd also hear For Mr. Morrison is it's a total revamping of a curriculum, and that is big work, and that's not something we can just say, hey, why don't you go 8F next year? That's not going to work, and we have no intention of doing that.
I would say that's very reassuring because I'm sure, as you said, everybody shares that concern. Brian, you mentioned earlier the strategic planning committee is going to see all of this. How does that work layer into any direction? And if that's going to take us in another conversation, then we can table it, but I was just curious.
Yeah, no, so what will happen Thursday is the plan team will actually see the entire environmental scan, which is this plus all the other data from the survey. They'll also see the 3 different presentations. They will then spend the afternoon identifying the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of our district. So it's possible that grading could come through in some fashion there. But then that's going to build into, down the road, what are our core priorities as a district? So that's really how any grading work would happen through the strategic plan. But I think the more, I'll call it day-to-day, or the A to F piece is going to happen from the grading task force. Okay. And I think that's the focus, is making sure that teacher teams that say, we want to be involved in A to F are the ones that will have an opportunity to, but not pushing that for any teams that are good where they're at for next year. That's our big focus.
Thank you.
Because of the work involved, as they've said.
All righty. Thanks, everyone. Moving on to the second item under curriculum is the implementation of a co-teaching pilot. I'll turn that over to our Director of Student Services, Leslie Owens.
Thank you, President Dillon. I am really happy to bring this brief initial update on the co-teaching pilot for next school year, the 2022-23 school year, for our freshman students in the areas of English 1 and World History. So just kind of globally how we arrived here is looking at our continuum of service delivery across the district. We know that we have a gap in this area of providing co-taught classes for students who are in special education and who are approaching grade level standards and need to be enrolled in a general education course with some support in order to make up those sort of final gaps they may have. So when we looked at our offerings through that lens of access and inclusivity, again, we saw this gap and we started to make plans for how we could start rolling in co-teaching in a planful, careful way. A lot of the research that you read will tell you that co-teaching does not do well when you cannot provide it the type of support and training for staff that are involved that it requires. And so we didn't want to bite off more than we could chew, really, and we wanted to take it slow and small so that we could make sure that we could implement it with great fidelity and with a lot of support for the staff that would be involved, which led us to starting at that freshman level. Our associate schools offer co-teaching, and so it's not a model that's new to our families or our students, and it always created sort of a difficulty for us when planning for programming when students then transition to LT. So being able to start with our next class coming in, that allows us to work really hard on the setup and the training that's needed, and then we can scale that out in future years as far as that class going on to their sophomore year and having offerings, as well as new classes coming in. More specifically, how we have started working on this is I'm working with our DCs for English Language Arts, Karen Reno, our Special Education Division Chair, Melissa Moore, our Math and Science Division Chair. Even though those classes aren't included in the pilot for next year, we want to be able to scale that out, and so Colin Voigt has been working with us as well. And Drew Eder, our division chair for student services, just kind of looking from an intervention perspective. But we have been meeting and working to figure out what are the numbers, what are the specifics of a pilot for next year. We've been working to secure the training that we need, and then we will be working with specifically our associate principals as we get into master scheduling and figuring out, again, some more of the specifics of what schedules will look like and how that will bear out in the master schedule. So our, just briefly, our students who are in special education in 8th grade, we start having meetings beginning in January. This year they went from January 31st. They'll be finishing up February 18th. We have a team that goes to our 8th grade schools, and they have a team, obviously the student's IEP team, who's there sharing information, standardized test scores, information about the student as a learner, goals and areas in their IEP that they're working toward. And so we're able to sit in on those meetings and determine which students would be appropriate for co-teaching. And that really is a team-based effort with the parents, the students, the associate school staff, and then our staff. So looking at that in terms of getting ready for next year, we have about 125 special education students total in our associate schools that will be coming to LT next year. About 35% of those students are currently enrolled in co-taught, so if we use that as our basis, that's about 44 students. Not all of those students will be recommended for a co-taught class here at LT. Some students who are currently in co-taught may very well be ready for general education with no additional support next year or with different types of support. So that's just a number that we've been able to use to plan, but we will have hard data as of February 18th when we've completed all those transition meetings. A co-taught class is a general education class, so we would be following our typical 26 student maximum. We usually look at a 70-30 split within those classes of general education students, 30% special education students, and 2 teachers, so 1 general education content teacher and 1 special education teacher. So looking at that, if we finish with those 44 students being enrolled, we'd be at about 8 sections of co-taught classes for both world history and English. Very often when we're planning at the 8th grade level for students English and world history and special education, their levels in those 2 classes match up. So if a student's enrolled in a special education cross-categorical English class, they're very often also in a cross-categorical world history class, because those are world history is obviously very dependent upon reading and reading skills. And so it's more often than not, we're anticipating that a student who would need an English co-taught class would also need that world history co-taught class, although we also know that that's not always the case. The whole, part of an IEP is the individualization, and we take that very seriously, that when we sit down at a meeting, we are planning for that student and not trying to make assumptions about their course placement. So that's kind of just the nuts and bolts of the numbers and the sections we're anticipating. Again, we'll have much harder data once those meetings are finished. We also always have transfer students and things like that start coming into the district, and so those will be included. Those meetings will be included as they come. Looking at next steps, and I've just kind of broken this down into what are the supports from a district perspective that we're planning for right now, the professional learning opportunities that our teachers and our staff are going to need to be ready, and then just sort of the logistical considerations that I talked about, master scheduling, section numbers, those all will happen as we have finalized numbers. But it's really important, again, looking at the research, that when you're training staff on co-teaching, you're looking at that pair, that teaching pair, and really trying to create a strong bond there, so that they can plan together, that they can work together, and that students would not have any idea which teacher is a special education teacher versus a general education teacher. We're trying to stay away from the typical models where it often shifts towards a teacher with an assistant. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for 2 very highly trained teachers that are providing education for our students in these classes. So it'll take a good effort of training, but we feel like we have a good plan in place. We have actually been able to secure time with really the guru in the field, Dr. Marilyn Friend. We have secured her to come and do 2 days of training in June for the co-teaching pairs that we know will be teaching, but she has also opened that up to any teachers that we know in the future, so specifically math, science, other classes that we'll be scaling out. Those teachers would also be invited to participate. She will then be back for 8 additional days of training throughout next year, which will really, a lot of that training will look like her sitting in, observing, and then coaching the teachers in sessions after. So we're really excited about that, and I know that she will provide us really, really good information and on an ongoing basis, which is fantastic. And then again, it's up to us to make sure we have that support in place in our schedule. So we want to make sure that teachers have common planning time. It's essential that teachers are able to plan together, and that we set up expectations for the teachers in terms of how often are they planning together. Is that daily? Is that a few times a week? What does their PLC schedule look like? How are they meeting with their counterparts in general education or special education? And then how are they bringing that information together? How are our DCs working together to provide evaluation and supervision of teachers? Who do you go to when someone has a problem in the class? Which DC is kind of in charge? So there's some of those little things that may seem small, but when you're in the thick of a school year, you want to make sure you have all of that laid out so teachers aren't left unsure during the middle of the school year. So I know that's quick and a very general overview, and I'm happy to take any questions that I can answer, or certainly any information that I can get more information about for anyone here. Yes.
I have a couple questions.
Is this going to replace humanities, or is this in addition to?
So when we look at our offerings, again, kind of looking through that lens of equity and accessibility and inclusivity, we've looked at our humanities program, and we are planning to offer those supports for our at-risk readers in a different way for next year. I don't have full details on that yet, but it's not really a replacement. Co-teaching is is a special education delivery model, but we have definitely looked at our humanities program to see how we can better support our general education students who may have some red flags in the area of reading in a way that will not make them feel stigmatized or separated into different sections.
I'm more worried about like it being a track, because I think we've talked about that before with humanities being more of a, that was, my understanding was one of the only co-taught classes that was there with having, multiple teachers within the classroom. So will there be humanities next year?
There will not be humanities next year, no. And it wasn't exactly a true co-taught model because it was more of a
mixed where you had teachers in the classroom.
Sure.
Okay. And what kind of data points will you use for success of the co-taught model?
So we will be looking at, certainly again, because this is based on a special education model, really, we'll be looking at students being able to make progress towards their goals, which we would do for any special education class. And then we will be looking at students who are then able to move from a co-taught class into general education. Right now, we have cross-categorical classes and then prep. And so what we have found over the years is that that can be a really big leap just from even just how a student feels in those classes and feels included and feels ready. And so we want to make sure that we have a way that students can feel very, very prepared to keep moving up in levels and keep making progress. And so with a co-taught class that provides them a lot of support in a general education setting so that students aren't feeling that, that hesitation to move into more rigorous classes. Typically, students move from a lot of special education support or more special education support their freshman year to fewer special education supports their senior. We would anticipate the same movement with the co-taught model, but we'll be looking at those markers. We'll be using assessments that we have always used. MAP testing is one way that we can look at some standardized assessments, and then just, again, the standards in the class and making sure that they're meeting their standards.
And then what other, I know we had talked about like specifically with like EL, those kind of things of what other students will be placed within the classroom.
Sure.
What are you looking at just?
So those are kind of two, well, they're not kind of, they are two separate things. So we are also looking at our English learners and looking at how we can use sheltered sections of our prep classes in order to provide.
I'm talking within this, with the other 70% of the students in the general ed population.
Sure.
How will those students be selected?
So there's not a selection, it's an enrollment into prep class, and in terms of general education students, you're just placed into a section. The only placement into a co-taught class is for the special education students.
I think we had some conversations, though, about EL when we had gone through some of that, that there might be, even if there's an EL student without an IEP, for example, that would be one that you could say they may be better placed in a co-taught model.
So we would be looking at a sheltered section more so than a co-taught model, and in the sheltered section, we'd be looking at more push and support for specifically English learner, somebody who has specific training with English learners. So they would still be included.
Do we?
What's that?
We don't have that, though, for next year.
We do have some teachers that are getting SIAP training, and Karen, Reno, and I are looking at how we can, again, shelter those sections with specific teachers who have the training so that they can provide that. We also are looking at, again, back to our humanities and kind of taking the staff that has been previously allocated toward humanities and providing some specific literacy support for any student in need, including English learners.
So the students will just be randomly selected?
For general, yes, in the general education
70%.
sections. Yes, yes.
And then you would have like the sheltered in place with the SIAPS training in a different section?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a big piece of a co-taught model, is that you're only placing students in there who are in special education. The rest is just a general enrollment into general education.
But I think we had, I'll have to go back through my notes, but I know we had some selection where Karen had said that some students could be, like, they would benefit from that. And we do
have some crossover of students who are English learners and also have an IEP.
She said it wasn't with that. It was when we discussed the EL.
I'll have to go back. I will definitely go back and I'll clarify.
I know that there were some that they could benefit from this too, rather than a push in with the shelter.
Sure,
with the
sure.
SIAPs.
I'll definitely go back and look at that.
Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Leslie, I'm excited for you to be, I mean, this is awesome. I know you've worked really hard on this program, so I'm excited for you to be.
We are thrilled.
To this point. What other districts, you mentioned at the beginning, other districts in the area, what other districts are most doing this now?
Pretty much all of them.
Okay.
So our associate schools all do co-teaching. In terms of other high schools, I don't know of another high school that does not do co-teaching. You know, we are a little bit of a late adopter on that, and you know, back to your kind remarks, I have to say that there have been so many people over the last decade and beyond that have worked really hard to bring this here, so it's certainly not, you know, only on my, because of me. There's been so many people that have worked really hard to get us to this point, so we're thrilled to be able to move forward and to offer this as part of our continuum, so that our students have the same benefit, like I said, of the other schools in our area.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I would second that excitement and enthusiasm too, because I've heard, I've talked to a lot of people from different districts, and I've heard really great things about co-teaching models, and so I'm really encouraged. So thanks for putting all the work into it.
For sure. Thank you so much.
And I'm going to third that as well. I'm thrilled that you're moving in this direction. It's encouraging to hear that we have students who, coming in as freshmen, require a certain level of services, and that decreases by senior year. It will be exceptionally exciting if we can show that this model helps accelerate that, and that they're able to, you know, to gain more. I mean, what an amazing ratio of teachers to students. That's, we're lower than the 1 to 15 in this. So that's super, super exciting. And I'm really excited to see what becomes of it and how it unfolds from here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping to be, you know, reporting on some really great success in the next, this time next year.
Yeah, excellent.
Great, thank you. Our final agenda under curriculum is the 2022-23 textbook and instructional materials for the second reading. Scott Eggerding.
Thank you. We have no changes from the first reading, so unless you have any questions, I'm going to leave it right there. We have the exact same books,
Appreciate
the
that.
exact same amount, and there have been no changes. We will have some additional changes coming a little bit later this spring for reasons I'll explain then. But for tonight, I'm going to recommend that we move forward to Monday night's meeting with the information as presented to be adopted as presented.
Sounds good. All righty, great. Then we can move on to our policy agenda item, and it's a second read of our Press 108 policy updates. As the address.
Thank you very much, President Dillon. Very similar to Scott Eggerding with the curriculum, with the textbooks. We have very few changes from the previous first read that we spoke about at the Committee of the Whole and the regular meetings in January. There were two policies, Policy 6135, which dealt with the Accelerated Placement Program, and Policy 660, which we did have a couple of outstanding questions. Policy 6135, the question that remained had to do with the auto selection of courses for students who met certain requirements. Scott Eggerding has been doing some research on that and has a little bit more clarification, so I'll turn it over to him in one quick second. And then in Policy 660 for curriculum content, the only outstanding question for that was related to one of the required questions that the board had as it related to health education curriculum and the different standards. There was a little bit of some confusion as to which we should respond to. And some of that is the wording that the press policy has in that question. They give multiple options, but only two answers for it. And so we do have some clarification on that as well, too. So we'll get into that shortly. But Scott, if you wanted to talk about 6135.
Sure. As curriculum directors, I mentioned the CADCA group during our grading discussion. This has been the bulk of our conversation this year. And we've actually had conversation. There is a representative in the Naperville area, a state representative, who'd like to propose some clarifying language to 6135. I know superintendents have had similar meetings. I know Ed Red has had a similar meeting. There's a lot of confusion. I mean, ultimately, here's the most important thing. The goal is to make sure that students are placed in the highest levels possible. And you want to make sure that a student is challenged and that they aren't held back for any reason. And that is an admirable goal. As we look through the details of 6135 as it's written, we're not sure how that gets at the goal. Because you're supposed to use standardized tests as the placement. Well, you only have a 2-year science requirement. They take the standardized test after their 3rd year. The placement for English and social studies is based again on that standardized assessment, which is fine for English, but they will have already completed their graduation requirements by the time they finish the SAT. And then math, there's only a 3-year graduation requirement, same issue. There's also confusion as to how this applies from 8th grade to 9th grade. Because the way it's currently written, we would need to get all of the data from our 8th grade schools in August, when they get it, after we've done all sectioning, placement, and hiring, and then make changes. So there are some logistics that we're a little concerned about. That being said, everyone is at this point adopting the policy. Partly because there's nothing that we're opposed to as far as the policy. It's more in the procedure and more in how you roll it out. We intend to be fairly consistent and as we do that. I've had conversations with our 8th grade schools. They're sort of puzzled as to how they could make this work as well. That being said, we currently use data from our associate schools for initial placements. So if that is something that can be added into an amendment to the law or is allowed by us in our procedure through our legal channels, then that makes perfect sense, and we're totally on board with that. We have no, we don't want to say, we don't care what you did for 8 years. We want to put kids in the best place possible. So we don't have a whole lot of changes at this point, but a lot of really good conversation. And Brian, I know you've had similar conversations with superintendents.
Yeah, it's, very, very similar. The recommendation is adopted because for 2 reasons. There's a chance that the policy might be updated before it actually is implemented. The second reason is we have about 1.5 years before the implementation procedures have to be in place. So that's the recommendation, is to adopt it, and we can either adjust it or, well, we are going to have to put the implementation procedures together. And I think, I'm not going to speak for the board, but the intention of this policy is very positive. It's just a matter of working through the implementation piece.
And then moving on to policy 660 as it related to curriculum standards, the required question had to do with content within our health education program, and specifically the National Sex Education Program. And in the wording from the initial Press 108, it asks 2 choices that districts have, and then based on those choices, required questions. Franzik, we've gone back and checked with Franzik, and Dr. Waterman has spoken with Franzik as well about this as well, to see what their recommended answer was. Their recommended answer is to answer with option 2 in that. We do offer sex education, and so they recommend we select option 2 in that required question. And basically what it says is we are stating that we do offer that sex education. As part of the policy, we don't need to list out the specific curriculum in that, and that's what they're saying. And that is consistent with what we have in other policies, or other sections even within the same policy, where we list the requirements that the district has to offer curriculum and teach certain areas, but not go into the specific sections or the specific curriculum. And so Franzik's requirement of this is, yes, we are acknowledging that we do teach the National Sex Education Standards. However, we're not specifying all of the specific curriculum. So there's that clarification on that. Dr. Waterman, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Nothing more to add.
Okay, and just to be very clear, that's choosing the second out of 5 choices.
That is correct.
As opposed to the 4th out of 5 choices.
That is correct.
Okay, perfect.
That is correct. There was a little confusion and ambiguity with that, but that is correct,
Okay,
yes.
thank you for following up.
Absolutely. And absent those two points of clarification that we had from the previous board meetings, there weren't any other changes. Again, we have it broken down into the 3 sections just for ease. The first are 5-year reviews. The second are policies that are just administrative in nature with the changes, no substantive changes. And then the last group were the ones that we had the discussion on that had some language changes that have gone through press and through our legal counsel. But we had those conversations. There's been no changes from the first reading.
That was it?
That is it. I'm happy to answer any questions
Wow,
if
that was
anyone has any.
great. No, that's excellent. I just meant, we had so much discussion last month on this. So I appreciate that you guys worked through all of those issues that we had outstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Ed, would you expect on the 6135, since it is like not to be, the point that we were talking about, I believe, is number 4, and it's not to be implemented until fall of 2023, do you expect that we're probably going to get some press updates and as they kind of work through some of the questions?
I think we'll have some clarification, whether that's a wholesale change in it, given the time between now and when it's going to be implemented, or if it's just some more clarification on there. I do see that, and that's pretty typical where you see these things.
And we are hearing that Press 109 is larger than Press 108, so.
We'll just
He's
keep
not
it going.
joking.
No, he's not.
I'm not. I look forward to that.
Part 2 will be even more fun. Excellent. Things to look forward to.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ed. Moving on, you guys, we have, we're moving on to facilities. First agenda item under that is the 2022 flooring abatement project bid results. Brian Stashak.
Thank you, President Dillon. Good evening, everyone. We have a couple of, as you'll see here, February 1st was kind of a busy day in terms of bid openings for our summer projects. Before we jump into that, though, briefly, what I'd like to do is just let you know that if you, right now, if you look, you drive by South Campus, you will notice that there is a sectioned off construction area there on the north end of the B wing. And that is because what we are doing there is they have actually excavated an area to start bringing in equipment for the B wing air conditioning project. And as we mentioned, as we talked about with that project, we were going to get started here as soon as we possibly could. And so you will see the results of that. And so, like I said, if you look at that north area of the B wing right there at the end of that hallway, you will see that fenced area. And so it is protected from students. Obviously, and protected for anyone else there. But that project has begun. And so, again, you will see that, and we are on our way. We have both of our architects in the audience tonight, Ed Wright and Paul Gaida. And Ed, Paul, is there anything that we need to kind of elaborate on that situation at all?
Sorry.
A little bit more good news with that. All the equipment has been ordered as of today, with the exception of the chiller, which was sent back to get ordered as of today. So we've been through that process. Now that everything's been reviewed, we're expecting that we'll have most of the equipment on time as planned. So that's a big positive.
Yeah, so we just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. So if you saw that, you knew exactly what it was. So we are underway with that project. So that's good news. Okay, that being said, we're going to move on to the bid results that we had from February 1st. And again, as I pointed out, we had 3 bid openings on February 1st. The first one is for an asbestos removal project for flooring in 2 locations of the district. The first is here at North Campus, which is rooms 5, 6, and 7, and also room 306. And then the second part of this is the C-wing hallway, the upstairs section C-wing hallway. At South Campus, as also, in addition to that, the office of room 226. And again, I want to stress that when we have these projects, these asbestos removal projects, there is no threat to anybody right now. We are removing them and replacing those flooring tiles with, of course, non-ACM or asbestos-containing material flooring tiles. But that is just in the due course of our maintenance of those projects or of those floors, and so there is no threat to anybody right now. Obviously, the companies that come in and abate these have their appropriate protection and have to follow guidelines for Cook County and the Illinois Department of Public Health. But again, there is no threat right now for anyone in those facilities. That being said, we did have 7 bids that were received for this particular project on the first, with the lowest bid being $42,585 from Kinsale Contracting. Our asbestos removal consulting firm, MMLP, is recommending that we would award the contract for that removal to them. So that being the case, I'd be happy to answer any questions on those bids or any of those bid results before we move on to the other couple of projects.
Anything? Okay,
Okay,
all righty,
great.
we'll continue on.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next two projects that we had. First of all, we had bid openings as well on February 1st for the South Campus site work project. And just as a reminder, that is essentially the removal and replacement of the parking lot that is directly west of the Corral building. And so there are other parking lots, obviously, in that area, but we're not touching those this year. This is just that parking lot. And then also, there are various areas at South Campus where there are curbs, sidewalks, concrete work that has to be repaired. We have areas where curbs, and sidewalks are no longer meeting, so there's a trip hazard, those types of things. And so all of that work is included in this particular bid. And so, for that particular bid, we had a number of bidders. We had, I think it was, we had 9 bids for that project, and the low bid was from Abbey Paving in an amount of $418,000. So our architects are recommending that, based on their scope review with Abbey Paving, that we would award that contract to Abbey Paving. Ed, Paul, any additional information you'd like to add to that at all?
The only thing I would point out, and you may notice this if you've read the letter, there's a substantial allowance in that project of $50,000, whereas when you look at the other one, we're only at about 25 for a much larger scope. The reason being for that is we did identify that there's poor soil conditions there. Until we actually open it up, we won't know to what extent, so we want to make sure we had enough of an allowance in there to address those issues. I do anticipate a good chunk of that's going to be used as part of the project to finish it, whereas a lot of times we're fingers crossed and we hope to give back a lot. We're probably going to be using a good chunk of that. So.
And was that kind of the approximate idea that we were thinking about for that area?
Yeah, initially we were about, let me go back to my spreadsheet here. I want to say there was a total of, we initially, when we talked about it back in June and August, we thought we'd be around $330,000. So we are a little bit higher, but also, again, that does include that allowance that Ed was talking about. And so when we initially put these estimates together, we don't have soil borings for soil conditions and those types of things. So now, obviously, as we go through that process, we're getting a little bit more accurate information with those.
So they're still the lowest, even in consideration of the general allowance of $50,000?
Yes. Yeah, that is included in all of their.
Gotcha. Okay.
The bid spec requires that for all contractors, so everyone would have that allowance included in their dollar amount.
Perfect.
I know this was one of those that we pulled separately because we weren't sure. We wanted to put the money into that right now.
Yeah.
Are you feeling like that is something that we should be doing? I mean, I know that was a question at the time, but we were just a little shaky on that.
Yeah, I do think for the dollar amount here, I think it's important to actually have that parking lot replaced. That parking lot is when we go back to our facility study that we had, that is the oldest and the reddest of the parking lots, I guess, if you will, on our facility study. And really, in addition to that, those curbs and sidewalk are really important. We're seeing some issues with some students with mobility issues relating to those curb and sidewalks where there's areas that are, like I said, that are not level, those types of things. So I do think it's important that we move forward at this point with that project.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I was going to ask you, Brian, too, if that was, I remember there was some talk about like the ADA and things like that.
Right.
So those curbs will be meeting those standards and those requirements then?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. At least with this, what's in the scope of this project. There may be other areas that we
Sure.
have, like on the north end of the
Yeah.
facility, those types of things that we're not touching with this project, but at least in here, we're covering those.
Okay.
So that is the South Campus site work bids, and again, any additional questions, be happy to answer those.
Is good? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, the electrical vault.
No, actually, before we move on to that, we have the general remodeling project.
Thank you.
Yep. So that particular project there has a number of different, sub-projects to it, I guess, if you will. And so, first of all, we have this additional drain tile along the north wall of the North Campus main building. And as you recall, that particular project is because if you go down to the tunnel area of the building and the classrooms that are in that area of the building, we are seeing a lot of water that's coming into the building and causing damage. And so we definitely have to do something about that. I'll talk a little bit as I go through this why you have those pictures in your packet as well. We're also replacing the windows across the street in the field house, and also the technology wing over in that area as well. We also have the floor tile replacement. So the removal that we just talked about, the floor tile replacement is part of this contract. We also have the exit 25 at South Campus, which is the exit where all students essentially who are riding buses come in and out. There is an interesting scenario there where they actually have some trenches that are dug underneath the floor, which were originally there for the purpose of providing piping and that sort of thing. The floor itself is in bad shape, and really the purpose of this particular project is we're gonna fill in those trenches and actually have much more of a solid floor there going forward, because as we said, it does take quite a beating from all the students entering the building there for transportation. And then we also have some additional fire alarm devices that we're adding. We talked about those. Those are through the life safety survey. And then finally, as a smaller piece of this, but we do have some outside venting that needs to be done. We have a clothes dryer near the pool here at North Campus that is currently vented into the room. And so that's going to be the final part of this project. We're going to obviously vent that outside, which, by the way, that is also on our life safety survey as well. And so we're going to have that taken care of. That being said, so we had two bidders for that particular project, and Hap Builders was the low bidder with a bid of $874,000. And so we would be, again, also with the scope review from the architects, we would be recommending moving that contract forward. Ed, anything I missed on that?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. With the exception of the fire alarm devices, that will complete all the remaining devices on the life safety report for South Campus. So that'll all be done, and we should feel good about that.
Yep. Thank you. So any questions on this particular contract at all? Again, as I noted down here, you'll see that we are at a total right now of $7.9 million in renovations for this coming summer. Or actually, I should say now, right? We've started on those. Roughly $3 million of that is expected to be covered. Well, $3,050,000 is expected to be covered by grants. And so the remaining dollars there, of course, will be covered by the district, what we have available in the district budget, and then some of the district fund balance reserves, which we'll talk a little bit more about in March as I revise the 5-year forecast for the district, as I typically do at that time of the year, because it makes sense to plug all these numbers in and look at that. So that's kind of where we are with these projects. The one question that came up from as we were talking amongst ourselves is if it's agreeable to the board at this particular point. Obviously, we're not voting on anything tonight. However, if we're planning on moving these forward, and again, if it was agreeable to the board, we would like to work with these companies and get the letters of intent signed to move forward with this, because at this particular juncture, every day counts as far as the delays in the supply chain and those types of things. And I don't know, Ed, if you wanted to add a little bit more to that.
The specific one we're concerned about is the window replacement at the Vaughn building. We're just seeing extremely long lead times on the aluminum frames and some of the glass. So the sooner we can put them the task on it, the better off we'll be.
So are these coming to us then to vote on next Monday?
They would be on Tuesday. They would be, yes, on Tuesday they would be, we would ask the board to officially approve these contracts. However, tonight, if it's agreeable, we'd like to move forward with getting those letters of intent signed with those contractors so that we can get the process going, because as we said, every day counts right now. And we would normally not ask that, of course, but this is kind of an unusual situation, an unusual time.
And on that note, related to that, does this impact any of our use of the buildings, and how will there be any downtime, and what's impacted, and
When do we expect to finish it up?
So these contracts here, these are all expected to be completed before, all the work that's on here is all expected to be completed before the start of school in the fall. However, I will tell you that to the point of what will be impacted, this summer is going to be impacted quite a bit by not only these projects, but really the HVAC projects as well, where we're gonna shut the field house down here in North Campus front, I think it's May 16th. And essentially, we're looking to have that out of service until probably, I think it's mid-September, September 16th, right around there, to give them, the contractor, some extra time. So that's really, that facility is going to be out. We know that we're going to have, obviously, the B wing and the C wing at South Campus. Both of those are going to be out. The parking lot. So, you know, we're going to have quite a few facilities. We've already had multiple meetings as an administrative team talking about where we can go, summer camps, parking, all those types of things. So we do have a plan in place for all of those facility closures.
Right.
Facilities that won't be able to be used.
Okay. All right. Are you guys in agreement to move forward with the letter of intent? Okay? Yeah? Okay, great, go ahead. Thanks, Brian.
Great, thank you.
Brian, is that, what are the pictures?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder. Yes. So what we included in your packet some, what I think are really nice renderings, because I think they really help us out. There's an unfortunate part of the construction that we have to, with the waterproofing here at North Campus, that is going to take place, and that on page, well, it says 173 here, I'm assuming it's 173, but you have this particular picture here, which shows what the outside currently looks like. With this particular project, we are going to have to remove those trees that are out in front of the facility. And so I know that we briefly talked about this before, but the goal, of course, is to try to save as many as we can. However, we're not even so sure that perhaps the tree roots that are there aren't potentially the cause of some of the water that's you know, getting into the building there. And so really we have two you know, additional plans. Once we lose those trees out there, we wanted to kind of give you an idea. There's two, you know, plans we're looking at here. There's an original plan and then an alternative plan. So we're kind of looking at that original plan, which has a few higher trees, replacement, you know, in the front. And again, remember, it's not going to look like this the first day we plant those trees. It's going to take a little bit of time, obviously, for these to grow. And so we have the original plan, which has a few taller trees in the front, and then the alternative plan, which has some lower trees that will be kind of kept at that lower level. So we're kind of talking internally about how, you know, that will go. But again, I just wanted to kind of give you an idea in terms of what this is going to look like and make everybody aware of the fact that, look, unfortunately, some of those trees there are going to have to be removed and obviously replaced. But it is going to change the look of the front of the building there as you drive by on Cosset. So.
Do we have any alum graduates with, you know, nursery backgrounds and landscaping businesses who might want to help beautify the front of our building? It would be great if we had some input on that.
Yeah, we can look into that. I'm not sure. It is currently part of the contract.
Sure.
That we have.
Yeah, for that allowance.
And so the replacements there, essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, they'd be working with their subcontractor who would be the architect to do that, is that right?
Well, we've already had a landscape architect do all the design and layout for it, and then their subcontractor would be a landscaper that does all the install work.
Great.
Yeah, so that was the purpose of that. So you kind of get an idea of what that will look like, because you know, obviously this is the one that's really going to change the outside look of the building, and you're going to notice that right away. So it's unfortunate, I get it, and I know it, but again, we're not so sure that the trees that are there aren't part of the cause of the problem too. So we have to look into obviously all of that. Yeah.
Thanks. I think we're good.
Okay.
All righty.
Thank you.
Are we ready to move on?
Now we can, yes. As long as everyone here is ready to move on, we sure can.
I think we are. I just want a reminder too, still hearing some noise out in the crowd, if we can just keep it down a little bit so we can finish up here. Thank you. Okay, Brian, so are we done?
So we have, we'll talk just briefly about the vault. Yeah,
So I kept wanting to get to, so yeah, thank you.
That's right. So again, as I said before, we have that $7.9 million of money set aside for construction right now. That does not include the vault project right now, and that does not include the scoreboard that we've talked about as well. So we're still wrapping up some numbers on those. But just to give you an idea, I wanted to share this briefly with you today because we will, this is regarding the vault, we will be asking the board to make a decision on this contract at Tuesday night's meeting. We just had the bid opening today, so this is fresh information, and so that's why it was not included in your packet originally. But in order to keep this particular project on the correct timeline, we will be asking the board again to make a decision on Tuesday. So that's why I wanted to get it in front of you tonight, even just for a preliminary look. And so just to be clear, you have a bid tab in front of you. There were 3 bidders today. BME Electric was the low bidder at $680,645. This particular bid does not include any of the ComEd equipment and any of their work. This is the work that specifically has to be done that on district property and district-owned equipment. Ed, do you want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that as well?
Sure. So ComEd obviously provides their particular equipment, the transformers, those things. They'll pull the main line that gives you power to the building. It's the district's responsibility then to excavate, put in the conduit for those lines, build the pads that those equipment sit on, and then any secondary lines that go from the equipment back to your building. So that's all the stuff that's included in here, plus filling back the vault and repaving and all that extra stuff that has to go in there to get a complete project.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So again, this is our portion of this. The ComEd portion is still out there, and we're anticipating about another $200,000 with ComEd for this project. But again, we really don't have much of a choice. We have to obviously deal with that vault issue. We have to keep the power on in the building. And the longer we let that go, the more we're going to start to see, issues with that. And so just to, like I said, to give you that $680,000 number, we have not done any scope review or anything along those lines yet.
A little bit.
Oh, you did a little bit today.
Yeah,
okay.
We did have a conversation with them today, and we're going to have a more detailed one, but the preliminary conversation suggests they are very comfortable and they have everything covered. So.
Well, see that from 2 o'clock this afternoon, a lot of things have happened. So thank you, Ed, for that.
Sure.
And so obviously, like you said, we'll do a much more of an in-depth scope review and then make the recommendation to the board for Tuesday night's meeting to move forward on this contract as well.
And it's normal to be so, it seems such like a big discrepancy in numbers.
You're exactly right about that, and we talked about that today, too. I don't know, Ed, if you want to...
I could talk to that a little bit. So it is somewhat of a unique project in that it's not a straight electrical project where electrical contractors would just come in and do their electrical work. They have to do the asphalt work. They have to fill the vault in. So there's a little bit more to it. So we open it up to multiple types of contractors to see who that might be more attractive to. So general contractors that are used to handling multiple trades, none of them had any interest in it. It was kind of, in their words, a little small, and they're kind of full, and there's better projects out there for them. We looked at paving contractors as well. None of them really wanted to handle the electrical work. They wanted to work as subs to the electrical contractor. So not really surprised in this because electrical contractors aren't necessarily used to dealing with these other scopes of work, but they were the ones that wanted to lead the bids, and so I'm sure they all got very, very different numbers from subcontractors. They probably don't have the same pool as a general contractor might have, so they're probably getting limited sub numbers and then probably putting in a little bit more overhead just to manage those folks because they're not used to doing that. So unfortunately, that's just the nature of this type of work. But we did make extreme efforts to try and get everybody possible to bid it, and this is what we ended up with.
So that's where we stand on that particular contract as well. And like I said, we would ask the board to, we will be giving you information in the packet to hopefully, like I said, vote on and move forward with this contract on Tuesday night.
With the intention that this work would also begin during the summer as well?
Yeah, this one, there's nothing that we can really do with this one until the end of the school year.
Right.
And so there's a lot of prep work right now that's going into this because beside, our work here, we're working with ComEd. Their engineers are electrical engineers, so there's a lot of work that's going into this right now. But we've made ComEd aware, very aware of the fact that we have a very short window here. And this is why I wanted to get this in front of all of you today as well, so that Tuesday we can move forward, because we really need to keep this on the timeline. If we were somehow to miss the window of this summer, and there are some long lead times with some of this equipment as well, if we were to miss the window on this coming summer for this project, we're waiting another whole year. There's no way we can shut down a facility, as we may have to do. We may, there is certainly the possibility that we're looking at a multiple day power outage here, 2 or 3 days, as they switch over and do those kinds of things. There's really no way we're going to get that done in the middle of a school year.
And this bid does not include any of the landscaping or any of the other additional things we would do to make that area look nice. We talked a little bit about that.
This does have some
does,
fencing
okay.
enclosures and things like that around the equipment to shield it from the neighbor's view.
Okay.
Yes.
There may be some additional landscaping you may want to add
Okay.
after the fact, but there is at least
Yeah.
something in here.
We can look at what that would look like.
Sure.
Then at a later time. When we
Certainly.
get-
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll have a
Absolutely.
landscaper out here doing other work, so it's easy enough to say, hey,
Yep.
come on over here and.
Great.
And again, remember, this is being moved to the, what direction is that at, north?
South.
I'm sorry, to the south. And if you look in that area, we already have, there's an actual generator that's there. The district dumpsters are there, and there's fencing in front of all of those. So I don't want to say this is going to fit in nicely over there. That's not necessarily what I want to say. But it certainly is going to fit in a little bit more with that particular area of, and some of the things that we're utilizing over there. But we absolutely will continue to look at that. And if we need some additional landscaping over there, we'll certainly do that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ed.
No problem.
Thank you. Yep. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
We can move on now to the human resources. Our only agenda on there is the stipend committee recommendations. Ed Piotrowski.
Thank you, President Dillon. We do have 2 stipend committee recommendations for this month's board meeting. One is for Arabic Culture Club, which we are recommending to move from a pilot status into a full club status with associated stipend. And one is for our esports club, which is already an existing club, but we are recommending a change in the stipend due to a couple of factors, which I'll get into real briefly. Arabic Culture Club was approved to move into a pilot status in January of 2020, and so obviously time has told us that in March of 2020, when schools were closed down, that obviously impacted the club's ability to meet, at least in person. And for the 2020-2021 school year, they met virtually, and instead of recommending to full club status at the start of this school year, we wanted to give them an opportunity to meet with students on campus and really establish themselves as an in-person club. They have certainly done all of that, plus, and more. So we are very excited to recommend Arabic Culture Club for full club status with the associated stipend with that. And then Esports Club. Esports Club was approved as a club, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago. It has met regularly since 2018, 2019, providing students an opportunity to engage in different video game competitions. When it was first created, it was much more of a smaller club. There were some high schools that had esports leagues. What we were starting to see at the time was the emergence of college and university programs, where schools like Illinois Wesleyan, for instance, would offer college scholarships for students for esports. That, since 2018, 2019, has grown significantly at the college and university ranks. It has also grown significantly in Illinois, and so we're excited that the IHSA has approved a state series for esports club, and there's actually before that full approval, there's the IHSEA, which is or IHESA, I believe, Illinois High School Esports Association, which LT participates in. And so with the increase in competition with the new state series, they are now really participating in competitions every week. There's an increased number of students, but also an increased need for additional coaching hours, which which necessitates the increase in the stipends from what we had before to a stipend that more closely aligns with our other competition clubs. And so at this time, we are making those recommendations. The total overall cost to the district for these changes is about $6,700, but I'm happy to answer any questions about these two clubs.
Anyone? No? How many students do we have in the esports club?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head. I can find that out for Monday night, but I don't know off the top of my head. But it has been growing significantly, and the number of games that they're playing has grown significantly as well.
Great.
You know, we're hosting IHSA sectionals for
Right.
esports in April.
That's exciting.
Exciting. And the Corral has the esports lab, which is,
They actually opened up a big facility on Ogden Avenue that is an esports gaming lounge that schools use as practice facilities as well too. So it is definitely growing.
I think even a couple of those kids are winning and won scholarships. I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So,
Scholarships for that, yeah. That's awesome. Great. Ted? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that's, I think that's it. That concludes our agenda items for the evening. At this time, we'll begin the non-agenda related portion of public comments. Marilyn, do we have any non-agenda?
Yes, we do.
Ask you to calmly keep your comments to yourself until your time is up to speak.
Yes. Sunita Lewis is first.
Oh, you know what? Here, before we begin, I would like to read a few announcements, a few reminders. The Board of Education welcomes and encourages public comments during our board meetings. There are 2 opportunities for audience members to address the board as outlined in the agenda, at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. Board rules limit individual comments to 3 minutes. While the board appreciates your participation, please understand the board does not engage in dialogue during public comment. We take all matters seriously, and if there is a specific question or comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate board or administration contact will respond at a later time. While the board encourages constructive participation, attendees are expected to conduct themselves with respect and civility toward all in attendance and adhere to Board Policy 830. This includes not using vulgar, obscene, vitriolic, or defamatory language. Also prohibited is any conduct which berates, threatens, or intimidates a board member, staff member, student, or any other person in attendance, or which impedes, delays, disrupts, or interferes with the meeting. Any person who does not adhere to these rules and expectations will have their time for addressing the board cut off and may be subject to removal from the meeting. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and where you are from. We'll begin tonight. I know we have a few. We'll do our best to work within the time frame, which generally is up to 60 minutes, so we'll get started now. Marilyn, can you call our first speaker, please?
Sunita Lewis.
We ask that you respect everyone who's up at the podium speaking to and refrain from yelling out.
My name is Sunita Lewis. I am a resident of LaGrange and a parent of a LT High School sophomore. So my comment, firstly, was regarding communications protocols. I have several concerns with how parents, students, and staff are communicated with in regards to issues, timeliness of the responses or the emails that go out. I would expect that they go out as closely to the issue as possible. I know that you all do some investigating, and there are other situations that need to be considered. Also, that they be transparent. A lot of the emails are very vague. As a parent, I want to know what's going on. If something's going on at the high school that involves the safety of the children, I think all parents need to know exactly what's happening. The other is just consistency. So I know that there was an issue at the school on Tuesday with, the mask protest. I got no notification of that. My daughter told me. To me, when parents are barging into the schools, spitting at teachers, and doors have to be barred, that's a problem. I need to know that. And I don't want to be expecting my daughter, to come and tell me. I expect you to tell me. And so, that was an issue for me. I still haven't seen any correspondence as to what actually transpired. I'm getting all of this as hearsay from other students, which is unacceptable. And just, again, all inclusive. I know that a lot of the teachers don't know what's going on as it relates to some of the racial slurs. I'm finding out from teachers that they're finding out from students as well. How are there things going on in the school that the students and all the teachers aren't aware of? And it should not be smoothed over or, grazed over. Like, this is an issue for the community. It's not just a me problem. It's not just a Black student problem. It is a problem in the high school. It is a problem in the community. It needs to be addressed. And then my other question is, what is being done in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? It's not enough to have a statement. It's not enough to have a director. What is being done? I want to know exactly what steps, what measures I can expect, and when, I can expect to see those things. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Marilyn, we have another speaker.
Yep, just 1 minute. Okay, our next speaker is Heaven Washington.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to talk about my experiences at LT first before I really start. And first, I really want to say that racism is the real epidemic. And it's taken such a big toll on me, not just me, but a lot of the students who do attend LT. And it's definitely been something that's been hurting the school learning environment. So my question is, if you guys can say that you are dealing with the racism, what are we doing to end the racism? You know what I mean? Because it's been going on since my great-grandma went to high school here. And it's not just like a one-time thing, and it sucks that we have to have a racist outbreak to actually speak upon these situations. And I don't want to call you out, Grandma, but her bus was overturned when she was going to prom solely because of the color of her skin. And I live in fear every day of being the next hashtag. I live in fear of me having that same experience as my grandmother. I shouldn't have to worry about that in a school environment. So what are we really doing to end that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle Washington.
Hello, I'm Kyle Washington. I'm Heaven Gabrielle Washington's grandmother. And I got a couple, they all tie in together, what I'm going to ask. I thought LT was adhering to the mask mandate for LT. A lot of people in here don't have masks. So why are they here without masks on? And we have to have the kids have them at school. We still at school. That's one question. I want to know what you're doing about the racial tensions. The N-word is going around fluently like somebody speaking Spanish. and that's not okay at all. And racism is not new to LT. When I was a freshman, they tried to overturn our bus, okay? We didn't talk about it. We did something about it. It was physical, okay? I don't want it to become physical, but somebody touches mine, she got permission. They were going on a walk with, if there was an active shooter at the school. So they walked around and told them where a safe place was. When she was doing that, she got hit on the butt several times by a guy. She told him to stop. He didn't stop. He did it again, and she punched him. They wanted her to have a suspension, but she wasn't gonna have one. She went and told herself what happened, but she was supposed to get a detention. She didn't want it, and I didn't either. Because that, you know, that was an assault. And I should have reported it to the Western Springs Police, but I didn't. But I'm saying it now. And I bet you won't happen again. And
that's our time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Taylor Glenn.
Good evening. I'm Carol Johns. I've lived in the community for 14 years, and I'm a parent of four children. My daughter's in her final year at LT Transition. My son is a proud LT graduate attending the Kelly School at IU. My older daughter is a senior at LT, and my youngest son will be an incoming freshman this fall. I'm here tonight to find out what LT's plan is to go mask optional in light of Judge Grisho's TRO ruling a few weeks ago. I think it's time for LT to change to mask optional. There is so much confirmed data that supports how the masks are negatively affecting our children socially and mentally. The negative effects far outweigh the benefits, if any, of wearing masks on our children. There are many treatments now available for those that do happen to get COVID more seriously. Also, everyone has an opportunity to choose to vaccinate or use prophylactic treatments as they navigate this situation. When this pandemic began, it seemed like a really good idea to mask for the short term. We're now over 2 years into this, and I do believe, along with many others, that continuing to mandate masking our children is a form of abuse. My children are always telling me how they hope the masking would end and how uncomfortable it is wearing it all day. I have been holding out hope that all of you up there have our children and the staff in your best interest, and that you all would fight for their rights to be able to breathe freely again. Many school districts across Illinois have switched to mask optional, whether they were part of the original filing or not. I'm very disappointed that LT has not made the changes parents and students have been wanting, especially since the data supports it now. Denying education and separating the kids at both North and South campuses for standing up for their due process is horrifying to me as a parent and a U.S. citizen. I have always praised LT for being a leader and teaching our children to be critical thinkers and learners. The handling of this situation does not encourage critical thinking. The students have seen the nonsensical way of this continued masking policy in our school. Majority of other states are mask optional, televised sporting events, many celebrity events are maskless, and we see it all the time, every day. The students all hang out together outside of school in groups without masking for the past year or so with no repercussions. They've learned to be respectful with each other and quarantining on their own as needed, just like in the past when we had to deal with viruses, flus, and colds. They're seeing the data that supports that masking is ineffective, especially for their age group.
We need to move on. We have a lot of comments tonight. Thank you. Marilyn, who's next?
The next comment has been asked to be read by Dragan Nagovanovic. Dear members of the board, Dr. Waterman and Dr. Tyrell, I'm a parent of 2 boys at LT and an LT alumni myself. I would like to express my appreciation and support for the hard work you and the staff are doing to keep our kids and our community safe. My family stands with you. I am deeply saddened by the events that have taken place at LT and feel that the actions of those choosing not to follow the law and the rules of our school are disgraceful and irresponsible. Our kids, our LT staff, our principal, the superintendent deserve better. In addition, I'm deeply concerned when I picked up my son from North Campus one evening and witnessed people blocking the front entrance that were demonstrating in front of our school. My son experienced nervousness, anxiety, and health risk walking through a crowd that had no regard for other feelings, their health, or someone's life for that matter. My son is an honor student and just wants to learn peacefully, safely, and with respect to the regulations of our school. We owe him and all the other kids the right to enjoy a safe learning environment. While I appreciate people's right to an opinion, no one deserves the right to interfere with our kids' safety and well-being. Coming from someone who lost his father to COVID last year, I am confused as to the benefits the protesters are seeing by supporting the spread of the virus. It is proven that masks save lives, and I wish that my dad had one on, as he certainly would have been here with us today. The folks that decided to put our community in danger and are choosing to break the law are making a lot of noise and are trying to bully the board, the principal, the superintendent, the staff, and our kids into changing our mind about our safety. Thank goodness that they are a minority of our community. My family and I stand firmly with you and are asking for our voice of support to be heard. Please continue to enforce the mask mandate. Please let us know how we can better support you and let the voice of reason be heard across our community for the safety of all. Thank you for everything that you're doing in keeping our kids safe. Dragan Nagovanovic.
Thank you. I just want to pause as a reminder to please keep any comments while someone is speaking to yourself. If you are going to be disruptive, we will be asking you to leave.
Jay Reardon is next.
My name is Jay Reardon. Thank you for having me. I've got 5 kids, triplets and twins that have come through LT. The 3 boys are at college. They had an incredible experience here. You guys did an incredible job. Kilray was the best. I'm getting to know Mr. Waterman a little bit as well. What's happened in the last 2 years here is, I got to pick my words carefully. It's not good. So, all right, real quick. So I'm here to talk about, mask optional. That's what we're looking to do here. I was fighting with Brian about the technicality of that. There was we all know it was shut down a week ago Friday for with the TRO. It's no longer a law. That's what I'm fighting Brian about. He doesn't agree with me. I don't agree with him. So apparently we're going to have to get into a little bit of a lawsuit over that. So what I find interesting is that when the governor came out with the mask mandate, we said, okay, let's all do it. Let's wear our masks. So I want to tell you right now, I'm not here to take the mask away. If you want to wear the mask, wear the mask. If you want to get the shot, boosters, do what you got to do. We get it. But at this point, it's over. It's time to get out, stop ruining these kids' lives, and that's what's happening. You see this picture here? You guys see this picture? Brian, you see that? You know where that's from, right? That's from the Hinsdale game. There's not a single mask on any of those kids. I've got pictures. You go to the cafeteria, there's not a single mask on any of those kids. What's wrong with you folks? Your job is to look out for our kids, all of you guys. You're supposed to be looking out for our kids. You have kids as well. Look at the education at these tables. You've got doctorates. You've got, Christ's sakes, look at the education. Who doesn't have a mask here, or a master's? You got a master's here? I guarantee you every single person's got a master here. And this is what's going on. Mask free. We got to have masks. It's bullshit. So now you can throw me out. Cut it out. Leave the kids alone. Let them get on with their lives. Stop. And the heavy-handedness, too. The teachers were documenting all that. All of you guys. Dang it, I'm getting a little emotional. Sorry about that. But look, there'll be consequences for this. I'm here. My kids are out of here. They're out of here. That's okay. My kids are out of here this semester. I'm here for all these other kids. My triplets and twins are done. And the worst, they didn't learn anything. And learning about your, just listening to you guys talking about your grading school, I need 2 seconds. Your
time is up. Thank you.
Jeanette Quirk is next.
No, you're done. You're done. Your time is up. Thank you. You have had plenty of opportunity to follow up. You're done. This is disruptive to our meeting. It's time to go.
bullshit. Do your job. Do your job.
All right, do we?
Jeanette Quirk.
Hi, my name is Jeanette Quirk. I live in LaGrange Highlands. I've been here for 31 and a half years. Thank you, first of all, for implementing a co-teaching pilot. One of my dreams, I appreciate it. Yeah, our winter is cold, dark, long, and we look to the spring to bring us all some relief. Many people avoid the hard work that it takes to manage complex institutions. Many people have no patience for the work it takes to build a coalition of stakeholders, to create systems, to seek input, to be curious, to read research, to make adjustments, and to set aside personal preferences and ego to work towards the good of all. I am an educator and lived in LaGrange for a long time. I have such gratitude for all my life has held. I try not to blame people for problems they didn't cause. Working in the schools has been so informative during our current crisis. My district where I work remained open during the entire 2021 school year. When the students came in that fall, they were unbelievably happy to get back to school after the shutdown. Although we had new procedures to help stop the viral spread, everyone did what was needed to keep school open and illness down. Why did it work? Because we pitched in, rolled up our sleeves, and did all of this under the intention to meet the needs of the individuals and the group, because that's how a safe and civil society survives. This school year, the mood has only improved. A walk down the middle school halls shows kids being kids, laughing, talking, running when they shouldn't, and sneaking looks at their phones. We've resumed the majority of our extracurriculars. We are working extra hard to meet the needs of students adversely affected by life, up to and including the pandemic. Anxiety and loss of skills aren't going to disappear on their own. By and large, the students who succeed emotionally are the ones whose families are rational, consistent, loving, and supportive. In the preschool, I teach emotions and emotional regulation. I've had to work a little harder in a mask, and it's made me a better teacher. The quality of the responses by the children has not decreased. They are thriving. They still give hugs, they make friends, they learn every day. They learn from a stable system of cooperative adults working with diligence, kindness, and compassion. Like the children when they build block towers during choice time, towers take cooperation and time. Destruction and disruption are far easier. This board is a testament to those who build coalitions. I am with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Addison Schaefer.
Hi, so some of you know me. I'm Addison, sophomore at LT, and I'd like to start off with, really? You people really can't just go mask optional. I've sat quietly and respectfully in a room separated from masked students. You've tried isolating me, threatening suspension, taking away in-person education, and not only that, but 3 bathroom breaks, no phones. You finally gave me the right to eat at the same time as other students and go to the bathroom. So many districts have went mask optional. Why not give us the option? We shouldn't have to be forced into something that we don't want to unless you are my doctor, which last time I checked you guys aren't, then you do not know what's good for me and cannot give me medical advice. Masks are not effective, and I don't know why that you want to keep us on our, I don't know why you want to keep them on kids' faces. Teachers I have passed have called me an idiot. Students at LT have called me a killer or have told me to kill myself. And for what? Because I'm standing up for my rights and freedom that you won't give to me and other students?
Let her finish, please.
Anyways, I will see some of you tomorrow when you decide to keep separating me from other masked students and keeping me from class. Oh, and I will be standing up for my rights and freedom for however long I need to, no matter the consequences.
Gail Graziani. Gail Graziani? Okay.
My name is Gail Graziani. I'm a Western Springs resident, and I have 2 students at LT. I want to thank the board, the administration, and staff for putting student safety first during the pandemic, something that none of us here today have ever had to deal with before. To achieve a safe learning environment, it required an immense amount of work and creativity over the last 2 years. I personally lost a lifelong friend and Western Springs resident last May to COVID. No one knows how this disease will impact them. Will it be mild or life-threatening or deadly? People of any age can lose their lives to COVID, especially those who are immunocompromised. As difficult as online learning was at times, it kept our kids safe and learning during the most uncertain and dangerous point of the pandemic. Was it perfect or ideal? No, but it was what was needed. When students began to slowly return to in-person classes at the end of the 2021 school year, it was done carefully with safety measures in place, and for that, I am grateful. I'm also appreciative of the several vaccine clinics that the school has held for community members and students. Providing a vital service like this demonstrates LT's commitment to the health of the entire community. It's true that attending school during the pandemic has been a difficult experience for many, but it also provides valuable life lessons for our students in adapting to adversity and coming together as a community in difficult times. Once again, I appreciate all the efforts of the staff, board, and administration to rise to this incredibly challenging situation and to provide a safe learning environment for all.
Lindsay Dillard.
Honestly, I'm not quite sure what speaking at board meetings is affecting. I don't know what emails, calls, questions, or any other correspondence is affecting besides my own mental health and the mental health of my family. I am exhausted. Students are exhausted. The parents behind me are exhausted. You have broken and beaten us down hoping we'd get up, but you're only adding fuel to our fire, and our fire is burning bright. It's become evident that most staff at LT are brainwashed with the excuses of just following orders and our hands are tied won't hold up in court. Legal action is where I'm placing my hope. We have been warning Lyons Township of impending legal action, and that day is here. The district and staff will be sued for damages. We have evidence, names, police reports, videos, pictures of everything from bribery, imprisonment, segregation, and removal of basic rights like using the bathroom and eating. Lyons Township is knowingly breaking the law, and specific staff members will be named. Insurance will only partly cover these damages. The rest will come out of your pockets. Shame on those of you who believe in this circus. Shame on those who have not spoken up. Shame on the teachers and staff that are watching this remotely. These are your kids too. We've trusted you with the well-being of the most precious pieces of us, and you have failed miserably. I listened to the morning announcements at the school today, so obsessed with pushing inclusion and kindness, it sounded like you were only trying to convince yourselves. You have every child in upheaval at the schools, anti-maskers, pro-maskers, and a soft lockdown from the equality protest today, a protest fully endorsed by Principal Jennifer Tyrell, a protest that spilled into the hallways with students chanting, "Fuck LT." The students are done, the parents are done, we are done, and we are keeping our word. We'll see you in court.
All right, keep it down. We have a few more speakers.
Patty and John Ernst.
Comparing that to oppression just means you're racist.
Here we go. Patty Ernst. There's my other half there. Okay. I wanted to take this moment to let the board know how much we appreciate all the hard work you're doing. We have not attended enough of these meetings, and it's very impressive. All the changes that are coming along with the grading and the different thinking and the co-teaching, which is, like you said, a long time coming. But you have my deep gratitude for what you do and what you've had to endure, for navigating these past 2 years. It breaks my heart to hear of the division and the problems, the real problems that are going on here. Our kids graduated years ago, and they've done well. But the decisions that are made here and the work that you do are still very important to us, even though our kids aren't here. We moved here in 1987 for the schools, and because of the dedication of the volunteers, the staff, the teachers, this is still a place, a district where people want to live. And I'm afraid that I've taken it for granted a little bit too much, so I just wanted to thank you.
She's already said most of the things I was going to say, but we did move here in '87. Our oldest child graduated 17 years ago, our youngest 12 years ago. So I haven't really been following a lot of this stuff, but we should have been. I enjoyed the conversation about the grading system. I thought that was splendid. All of the different viewpoints, a lot of good thinking going on up there. I can't quite understand, though, what's the difference between a B- and a C+? I mean, you start doing the math on that, and it leads nowhere. I think I could be very supportive, A, B, C, right on down, just like that. The other thing I wanted to say is why I really came here is to lend support to you board members. I know people are getting loud and obnoxious both ways. I'm glad you're up here volunteering. As far as some of the things I've heard here tonight and elsewhere about how suffering the mask wear is, in 2010, I was a general contractor and I had a job in Springfield during the summertime renovating some duplexes. There was a lot of lead paint in there, so the whole crew, including myself, wore a mask, a suit, headgear, breathing protection, obviously, masks, and I was fine with it. For the people that can't handle a simple mask,
Keep it quiet, please. You can continue.
I'll just leave it at that. It can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Caruso. Is Corey Caruso here? No, she spoke already. She spoke already. Is this?
You were up here before? No, we're not. You can't yield time. You need to come up to the podium.
Michelle Nikolai?
We'll move on to the next. If you're going to interrupt, you will be asked to leave. We did not. We did not. Okay, this is Michelle.
Michelle Nikolai.
Yes, I live in LaGrange Highlands. As a resident of District 204, I support the Illinois and Cook County Department of Public Health COVID-19 guidelines. There is no one in this world who can predict the future of COVID-19. Everyone in this room and the LTHS faculty, staff, and students have different health and different immune systems. To keep everybody in District 204 safe from contracting COVID-19, public health guidelines need to be followed without emotional, catchy buzzwords. Residents opposed to vaccines and/or masks present expert advice, but this expert advice needs to be diligently investigated as to its legitimacy. Many times facts, beliefs come from hearsay, and the fallout from hearsay can be noisy, gut, emotional reactions opposing public health guidelines.
Vera Giotis.
Hi there. As you mentioned my name, I am a mother of 4. My oldest graduated from LT in 2020. I have a junior and I have a sophomore, and I currently have a 6th grader at Pleasantdale Middle. A little background on me, I'm a mastered, prepared, registered nurse, and I read a lot. And with that reading comes a certain understanding of the level of bias, not only in the TV news things that we see and hear, but also in journals that we read. I am here before the board today to speak of this current mask mandate. Masking children who have the lowest mortality rates makes no sense. I repeat it, none. Let's start with what we do know. The only effective mask is a properly fitted N95 mask. Most students wear cloth or loosely fitted surgical masks, which are not effective. There is ample research on the subject. I shouldn't have to find it for you. I sent it to Dr. Waterman at the start of the academic school year. COVID is not killing our children. The #1 killer of children in the U.S. is car accidents, folks. Do we put our kids in a car every day? I'd venture to say yes. Everything we do in life has a calculated risk, and that is just one of them. Well, I will say one thing, no one should minimize the negative effects of COVID on immunocompromised individuals. I repeat again that our children are at the lowest risk. Even Dr. Anthony Fauci suggests that Omicron variant is very contagious. However, at this point, it's becoming rather endemic. It just means, like the flu, it will always be here. What's the end game? Wear masks as long as you can, kids? I think there needs to be a change. The CDC director also states that death rates from COVID are grossly exaggerated by up to 75%. Dying with COVID is certainly not the same thing as dying from COVID, especially when you're considering 3 to 4 pre-existing conditions. What I can tell you is that I understand the immune-compromised state. Years ago, I had cancer. I survived it, and I understood the state of my immune system. I avoided crowds. I knew to stay away from people that weren't well. At no point would I expect people around me to wear a mask because of me. All immune-compromised individuals should approach life more cautiously during something like this, and that includes the elderly, that includes teachers with an immune-compromised situation. If you choose to wear a mask to protect you, my children, my family will support that. The perpetual wearing of masks on children is not a normal state, and I do not wish to normalize it in my own children. They are not killing their teachers if they expose their beautiful maskless faces. They are not vectors of disease. They are getting back to normal after 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Carolyn Bonastali.
Oh, that's all right. You can have one more comment. And we're at 30
Carolyn
minutes.
Bonastali.
We're limiting to the topics at hand. You can share with us next week.
Okay, hi, my name is Carolyn Bonastelli. I'm a proud graduate of LT, and all three of my children have graduated from LT themselves. I am a school social worker with a special education cooperative, and therefore my work brings me into LT several times per week when I meet with students, teachers, and administrators. I'm here because I, too, want to thank the LT School Board for their service to the community during this highly charged time. I trust you to thoughtfully research issues and make decisions in the best interest of all the students. There's so many passionate parents on both sides of this contentious issue, and I really believe every one of them has their child's best interest at heart. We just have different ways of going about it, and that's okay. But you do your best to shut out the noise and act on behalf of the students in your care. I personally have been very grateful that the LT community has taken CDC recommendations seriously. Staff and students have unfailingly worn masks, have quarantined when appropriate, and were vaccinated or tested. Students and parents that I work with often worry about bringing a virus home to compromised family members or contracting COVID themselves. This anxiety among a subset of students is very real, and I witnessed that firsthand today when I was at the school, and there was a protest about masks. And some of my students were very anxious about the fact that they were unmasked. Whether the school board decides to maintain masking in the future, and I will leave that up to you, but I ask that flexibility be maintained so that the school can quickly adjust to new information and situations. Transmission level in our community can and must be the catalyst that drives that decision. The goal must be not only to keep individuals safe, but also to lower our odds of ever having to go remote again, which was detrimental to student learning and social, emotional well-being. I worry that a decision to end mask requirements prematurely might have the unintended consequence of infection spread and school closure. The decision must be based on a measurable metric, and I trust the school board to determine that metric. LT has been able to maintain in-person learning the whole school year. It took a village to make that happen. Teachers and administrators jumped in and did whatever needed to be done to ensure in-person learning. Administrators subbed for teachers. Teachers used their limited plan time to sub for paraprofessionals. And our school board gives so much of their time to give every student at LT the best educational experience for them. LT teachers and school board deserves our thanks.
Thank you. I just would like to make an announcement here. Per board policy, we cap our topic sessions to about 30 minutes, and we're at that 30 minutes discussing the mitigation measures. Excuse me, do not interrupt or that is not helpful. I understand. We do this in the order of how it's received.
Excuse me, Ms. Dillon, I have asked you to allow me to speak tonight just like everybody else. You guys
Do we have other topics, Marilyn?
beyond
Additional topics outside of the mask? No.
Outside of masks?
Let her speak.
You know,
Let her speak.
you do not need to talk that way to people here.
Hey, let her speak. Come on, Waterman. Hey,
Excuse me, if you will wait for a minute, we will have to recess. All
let her
right.
speak.
I motion.
That's why we're here.
I motion to move to recess for the management of the crowd.
Deny her speak.
All in favor?
I call to recall the school board now. You
Let her speak.
speak, you cowards?
You should be ashamed of yourself. I don't know what the other plan is. You can't hear a mother